Okay, hello everybody. I'm David Wildstein. I'm the editor of the New Jersey Globe. I am joined with Micah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovich Institute of New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and Joey Fox, a reporter for the New Jersey Globe and the sole author of the outstanding New Jersey Globe Fall 2022 Voter Guide. I haven't trusted people with this kind of a baby to this extent before, and Joey did better than me. So next year when we do this for the 23 elections, it might be Joey and Mike and whoever works for Joey. I might not even be here, but he did great, and this was just a phenomenal read. And I hope everybody will read it over the next few days. We're here tonight to talk about an election where people are already voting. People have been voting pretty much since September 24th, when vote by mail ballots went out. But early voting began last Saturday. Today is day 6 of a 9-day early voting period. Everybody should know. If you're watching this, I think you know that Tuesday is election day. If you didn't know that, then we have moved into a new stratosphere of who we appeal to. But I want to talk about all of the races, and that's not just what's happening at the congressional level, but countywide races, some key local races across the state. Let me start with Joey and just give us an overview of this election.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that I'll say, and this is something that I have taken to emphasizing in stories and in the Voters Guide lately as well, is this is an odd election. It's an election that if somebody tells you that they know how it's going to go, they're lying. Like, it really is. There's a lot of different competing elements of this election that could spell lots of different results. So, presumably if you're watching this, you are pretty familiar with American politics, and the basic rule of midterm elections is unless the president is wildly popular, which in this case is not true, the party in power is probably going to feel some backlash. And so that's usually the dominant force in midterm elections. And that seems to be a very dominant force this time too. Joe Biden is not especially popular in the White House. Democrats are feeling the heat. Inflation, cost of living concerns are really top of mind for almost every voter. And that's going to hurt Democrats. That's a guarantee. There's no way around that. But then you've got these other factors and signals that are sort of all over the place. The biggest one that people talk about a lot is abortion. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, that has been sort of a clarion call for Democrats, and that seems to have boosted them somewhat. You've got sort of generic ballot polls saying one thing that's maybe, I don't know, like a Republican +1 environment. I think that's where the 538 average is at right now. You've got district polls saying another thing. Republicans are playing offense in a lot of really, really Democratic districts. You've got Senate polls, which New Jersey doesn't have a statewide race this year, but you've got Senate polls saying another thing where Democrats are still doing okay in states where they really shouldn't be doing okay. You've got special election results over the summer that saw Democrats running as if it was a blue wave year. Like, they flipped a seat and they held another really competitive one just kind of out of nowhere. So, and in New Jersey, that uncertainty is sort of adding even more to the uncertainty in New Jersey is the fact that there's no statewide race here. There's nothing that's drawing a lot of polling or a huge amount of attention. I mean, the House races are competitive. They've got a lot of money, but there's nothing quite like the Pennsylvania Senate race, say, where everybody feels like everybody's paying attention to it. And so this is my very long-winded way of saying everything that we can say about this election might be true, and it also might be completely wrong. It's an odd election. You've got some really interesting congressional races that we'll go over in more detail. You've got the Battle of the Toms, Kane versus Malinowski, which has always been very competitive. You've got Andy Kim versus Bob Healy, which is looking increasingly competitive. You've got other Democrats who might have been feeling secure before, maybe aren't feeling so secure now. You've got county races all over the ballot. You've got local races all over the ballot. There's lots of things. And more so this year than, this is not going to mean much coming from me because I have not been doing this for all that long. But this is a more uncertain election than I, in my relatively small political experience, am used to. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. So that's my opening spiel, and I'll pass it off to anyone else who wants to go on a rant.
Well, go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I am very, very glad to hear you say what you said, Joey, because I thought I was going to have to be the guy saying don't believe the polls, don't trust the polls. We really just don't know. I've never seen a cycle, and I'd be interested to know if either of you feel this way too. I've never seen a cycle in which there has been more garbage thrown at the wall, polling numbers really. And yeah, I'm sorry if that sounds strong or pejorative, but just really trying to game the polling, really trying to game those averages and game those aggregators. And so it really makes it very difficult to know what to think, because even a very well-respected site that is trying to do predictions, they're basing it on polling averages. And if the polling averages are being gamed, then we just don't know what to believe. Here's what I think I know. In the last two statewide elections that we had for governor and for president, about 300,000 more Republicans were voting than in the previous gubernatorial or presidential elections. So clearly, the name of the game for the Republicans is to keep that up, and for as many of those 300,000 extra Republicans to keep on coming out. The name of the game for the Democrats is to not fall into the trap of the midterm election, which Joey talked about. Joey talked about how the president's party suffers at midterm. There are a lot of different theories on why that is, but one of the ones that I've always been persuaded by is surge and decline. So in the presidential year, the president's party benefits from a bigger turnout, and they need those extra those voters to turn out to win. And in the off year, when those voters decline, when they're not turning out in as high numbers, and the president's party doesn't have them, then they suffer for not having those extra voters out. So the question is, do the Democrats behave more like 2018, where they had sort of 1.75 million voters come out statewide? Or do they act like the gubernatorial year last year, where they had sort of 1.25 million voters out? That's going to be the difference between whether or not Democrats really do well and have a good night in the state, or whether they have a state where a result where they're going to fall short, or the races are going to be so nip and tuck. So the question is, are they doing enough to turn out more than just the average number of voters than they could expect, or the normal number of voters than they could expect? Are they enthused? Are they energized? Are they acting like 2018? Are they knocking on doors? That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Those are the signals that I'm looking for.
And one of the things that I hear from multiple campaigns is that they're seeing from some internal polling and some tracking that they're a little stuck in the mud, meaning the numbers are now where they were last week and the week before, and things aren't really moving. And even when they're spending more money, they're not moving the types of numbers that they're accustomed to. I gather that is confusing a lot of campaigns. Something that I think is different this cycle than 18 is Republicans in some of the more, in at least the two most competitive congressional districts, the 7th and the 3rd, they're holding their own on money. You don't have that financial advantage that you had last time when Mikey Sherrill, significantly outraised Jay Weber, who got in the race very late, when Rodney Frelinghuysen got frightened out of his reelection campaign by Sherrill's war chest, maybe a little bit by Siley Avalenda, but also by the amount of money that she had raised early. Malinowski had outspent Leonard Lance. Andy Kim held his own against Tom MacArthur, who was a self-funder. Now what you're seeing is the combination. We don't just look at the money that's in a campaign. You look at the combination of what's been spent. So it's really a combination of the campaign committee and whether it's the House Majority PAC for the Democrats, or the Congressional Leadership Fund for the Republicans, or another super PAC, the D-TRIP, the NRCC, all of those combined, I think you've got more of a level playing field here, certainly than we did in 2018. And I think one of the things to really watch for in this election is not just what is the effect of the normal historical trends of a midterm election in congressional races, but what that's going to mean down ballot. Bob Hugin did a press call a couple of weeks ago, the Republican state chairman, and he said that last year, 2021, Republicans won over, they flipped over 100 mayor and council and township committee seats throughout the state. Republicans think they can do that again. And that's there. And with the House leading the ticket, as Joey said, that changes this a lot too. You don't have a presidential race or a U.S. Senate or a governor. Something else that has struck me in looking at this, and I see if the two of you agree. Phil Murphy, 5th year as governor, reelected last year by 3 points. Good win, first Democratic governor since 1977 to win reelection, but he's not a factor in this campaign. This is a federal election year. And whether you like Phil Murphy or you don't like Phil Murphy, this is a sitting governor that really isn't playing. You don't hear Republicans talking about Murphy. You're just not seeing that. The other thing, that I'm finding very interesting, and for those who've been listening to me, babble about politics for the last few years, I started this site in 2018, and I would say that New Jersey is very much a two-party state, a vibrant two-party state. Just that I didn't think Republicans were one of the two parties. I thought it was the two Democratic parties. I'm beginning to readjust that thinking, and one of the things that I'm looking at are these countywide elections and some of the gains you have a very strong, and we'll get to this later, but a strong possibility of flipping control of the county commissioners. Please, somebody, cut me off if I say freeholder, because I'm an old guy and I keep saying it, but control of the freeholder board in Cumberland and Gloucester could flip this year. Jim Hogan, the Gloucester County clerk, been in office forever as a Democrat and as a Republican. That's a real race. But you also have 2022 as a setup race in 23. So places like Burlington, Somerset, Passaic, maybe even Bergen, we'll get to that. You could be having Republicans win some seats this year, and that puts them in contention for a control election next year when Joe Biden will still be president. And maybe not, but maybe there'll be a little Murphy fatigue in an even year election. So what you're potentially looking at, and this, it really does astonish me for Blue Jersey, is it's very possible, we'll know a lot more next week, but it's very possible that Republicans could come out of 2023, maybe competing for majorities in both houses of the legislature, and get this, potentially having Republicans control county governments in 14 of the 21 counties. And that blows my mind for a state that's got 1 million more Democrats than Republicans. So why don't we start? Let's get into, because if whoever's watching this is probably most interested in hearing race by race. So let's get into it. Joey, start with the 7th district. That's the one that everybody's been talking about the most and for the longest.
Yeah. So, if you follow New Jersey politics, the district you probably heard about is the 7th. The most is the 7th. I keep on calling it the Battle of the Toms. I think I've already called it that once earlier on this call. So I'll keep on doing that. It's Kane versus Malinowski. We got a rematch of what happened in 2020. And because we had that initial election in 2020, and because we have that as a data point to go off of, we can almost look at this year's election as sort of a comparison to that one. Like, okay, so we have this 2020 election between Malinowski, who was first elected in 2018, flipping the seat to Democrats, and Kane, who was a state senator for 20 years, or I think it was about 20, led his caucus in the Senate, moderate Republican from sort of blue-leaning suburbs. That contest in 2020 was won by Malinowski by about a point. That was closer than I think a lot of people were expecting. And so now we can look at this contest in what ways it's shifted from that one. So by far the biggest shift is, and I don't know if David, you want to put up the map, is that the district lines changed. They changed everywhere, obviously. So we'll get to that in all these districts. But so this new 7th district, we don't have the map of the old 7th district up here, but it was shifted so that it's about 6 points more Republican than it was before. The old version voted for Joe Biden by 10 points. This one voted for him by like 3.5. That was drawn by Democrats on the redistricting commission. They were intent on shoring up most Democratic incumbents, but Malinowski became the odd man out. So they made his seat more Republican in exchange for making a lot of others safer. So as you can see, the dynamics of this district are very much blue in the east and red in the west. It's sort of nicer suburbs like the one that Tom Kean is from in the west that vote Democratic, and then they are canceled out sort of by big swaths of rural territory over in the west, like Warren County, Sussex County, Hunterdon County. And so the fact that you have a race that was decided by 1 point in 2020 and a district that grew 6 points redder kind of gives you an immediate indication of how this year's race might go. I mean, in order to determine how, like, the basic facts of this year's race, those are the only 2 facts you need to know. 1 point race in 2020, 6 points to the right since then. That sort of from the beginning made Tom Kean Jr. the favorite. The second that the map was released, most forecasters put it as leans Republican. And a big part of that was, I don't know if David, you want to flip to the other map of the 7th.
Okay.
The 21.
That Jack Ciattarelli absolutely cleaned up in this district in 2021. So you can see just how red this district can get. He voted for him by 12 points. Malinowski has also had a couple of other problems hit him. He had a stock trading scandal. It's still unresolved. The House Ethics Committee has not finished its inquiry into his late disclosures of stock trades. You also, as I said before, have a Democratic president with a lot of inflation. Those kinds of factors are just basic partisan gravity, will always hurt the party in power. So yeah, I think at this point, I feel like I should hand it off to someone else because I've been talking about this race for a while. But that, I feel like those are the basic facts of how this race is shaped up and what makes Tom Kean Jr. the favorite to flip a seat. He's the only Republican who is a favorite to flip a seat.
And Joey, I don't know if you have it in front of you or to memory, but you calculated what this district, with the new 7th district, without places like Milburn and Dover and Montgomery and Union Township and some heavily Democratic areas, you calculated what you thought this district might have looked like 2 years ago when it was Kean Malinowski the first time.
Yeah, so I calculated that out, and it came out to about a Kean 4-point win. The reason why that's a little smaller than you might expect is that the new stuff that got added, which is, big rural areas, and then Linden and Rahway, those towns are just sort of less elastic in general than some of the stuff like Milburn that got taken out. Just the way that suburbs vote versus rural areas and cities vote, suburbs are generally a bit more elastic. So that's why there's that little bit of a discrepancy. But yeah, it was still a Kean 4-point win. Who knows how the race would have actually gone in real life, right? Because if this district had already been in place, the parties would have behaved very differently about it. The candidates would have behaved very differently. So it's impossible to say for sure. But it certainly seems like Kean probably would have won on this district in 2020. And I mean, to Malinowski's credit, given the sort of bad hand he was dealt, he's played it pretty well. He's run a good campaign. He has certainly not allowed himself to be counted out. Democrats haven't fully counted him out either. They're not super optimistic about his chances, but the House Majority PAC still spending money on him. He hasn't been left for dead. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of a testament to, he was a strong enough campaigner to flip a seat in 2018 and win it again in 2020. You're still seeing that now. He's still a strong fundraiser, pretty convincing candidate in person. He still got it. But Tom Kean Jr. also has it, and all the other factors sort of point towards him.
Micah, let me ask you: was Tom Malinowski left for dead by the Democrats? The fact that they haven't pumped millions and millions of dollars into this district, is that is that an indication that the D-Trip has only done, really just a token amount, that the House Majority PAC really just a token amount? This has all been on Congressman Malinowski to carry himself.
Right. And, you can start with the in-state Democrats not, sort of sacrificing him on the map. Right. And it's been sort of the same story ever since. Right. So they all showed up to support him over the weekend as he was rallying for getting out the vote and, kumbaya. But these were the same folks that served up the tough map for him and chose to shore up Mikey Sherrill and Josh Gottheimer instead of Malinowski. And there's no love lost there. I mean, he's certainly making nice and he certainly is putting up the good fight, but he also readily acknowledges that the party was not there for him. And financially, you're right. I mean, we have looked at, token buys. There was one buy that came in. I don't remember. I think it was the DCCC, right? Where it was only after your story that they had cut off funding that they came up with another $100,000 for him. So I don't.
Saying one of Malinowski's big fundraisers? Is that?
Say it again.
Are you saying I'm one of Tom Malinowski's big fundraisers?
You are in this case. Yes, I think you are. Yeah. So, he has not had support from national Democrats or state Democrats the way that he would want. I think what Joey said is a pretty good reflection. They haven't left him for dead, but they have not lifted more than a finger for him either. And he has made the race what it is. And I'll talk about this a lot tonight. The early vote is something that I watch pretty carefully. There are 17,000 more Democrats than Republicans that have voted so far in the district. That's not a bad cushion going into Election Day, but certainly it's something that we expect to be overwhelmed by the Republican vote that we're going to see on the machines on Election Day.
Is that enough right now at this point? 17? Is that?
No, not close. But I also think it's going to improve from there too. I mean, we have several days of early voting left, so I think we'll wind up closer to 25 at the rate we're going right now. Also, may not be enough, but more of a cushion.
So there's also a district more than any other where you might have some registered Republicans who do vote for Malinowski. I mean, that's not going to save him necessarily, and I still think he's the underdog. But this is the one Democratic held district in the state where Republicans outnumber Democrats in registration. So those partisan registration numbers are not necessarily gospel in this district specifically.
I want to put those numbers up just to look. I'm not going to do it for every district, but let me do this. And by the way, a big shout out to Ryan Dubicki of the Associated Press, who has helped everybody in New Jersey do their jobs this year, because he takes these numbers and these files come in with millions of names attached, and he sorts them and puts them up online. And he has just, Ryan Dubicki, one of the, to me, one of the shining stars of this cycle. But if you look at the 7th district, and I wish I was good enough to just bring that up even more, but
you're going to need to find a way to zoom. It's really,
yeah. Let me see if I could do that.
Oh yeah, that bar. Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Oh,
yeah, it's too far over. Is that?
Yeah, there we go. I think that's
okay.
Squint.
So what you're seeing in the 7th? Let me see if I could shade that in. What you're seeing in the 7th is outside of Camden County, which is just like off the charts.
Oh, the number that I just used, the 17 now.
Yeah.
Norcross has a Democrats in the 1st district have returned 40,000 ballots in the over the Republicans. 40,000 ballots.
Camden has just been on early voting and vote by mail years and years before everybody else was, and they are reaping the rewards of this, and not by accident. I mean, by a lot of hard work. But the reality is here that of the competitive congressional races, 7 is still more than the other races. They're bringing him in. The question is it enough? And is that edge of the Democrats enough? Early voting, I mean, it's okay. It's okay. It's not great. and a couple more days, but we're 2/3 of the 2/3 of the way. And these numbers, I should say, reflect as of yesterday.
Yep.
They don't include today's numbers, obviously.
The only person who's doing better, other than Norcross, is Andy Kim. Andy Kim's got numbers that are at the next level. Malinowski's got good numbers. He's got Mikey Sherrill numbers. He's got Josh Conheimer numbers. But Kim is a margin above this.
Okay, so let me. I want to talk a little bit about Tom Kean, the challenger here, just because this is one of these rare opportunities where somebody who's been in public office has might be on the verge of flipping a House seat. Typically, historically, at least in New Jersey, over the last 60 years, most of the people who beat incumbents, Andy Kim, Josh Gottheimer, Tom Malinowski, they tend to be new faces, people that just come in and they excite. Tom Kean Jr. has been around for a long time. Was in the legislature for 20 years.
He's been running for federal office for a while as well.
He has, and it's interesting. I talk about this with people a lot, and I can throw this question out there. Sometimes I wonder when people say, "Oh, he's just riding on his father's name." Governor Kean hasn't been on a ballot since 1985. I think that's pre-Joey Fox. and Tom,
14 years.
Well, think about that. What that means, David. You would have to be in your upper 50s to have ever voted for Tom Kean.
Exactly. So what I'm sort of wondering is a lot of the name recognition for Kean, is that Tom Kean Jr.'s and not his father's. He's the one who's been running, for the Assembly, for the state Senate. He's run for Congress before he ran for the U.S. Senate. No doubt there is a Kean brand, because Keans have been on the ballot. I don't think anybody wants me to hear the Kean history starting in the 1700s, but there have been a lot of Keans. So the Keans are a brand. They have a university. They have a town in Monmouth County. But my question is this really Tom Kean Jr.'s name as it deals with voters in his district?
Well, the way that this works in a perfect world with the father-son combination, and we have a number of them. We have another one in the state right now, the Menendezes, right? The way this works, if it is working, it should be seamless, right? It should be transferring the name from one to the other seamlessly.
Like Donald Payne Sr. and Donald Payne Jr. did.
We've got a couple, right? Bill Hughes tried to do it as well. If this is working well, you can't really distinguish from one name to the other. It's a transfer. It's a seamless transfer of name recognition, intergenerational transfer of name recognition. But certainly, the father continues to be a statesman in the country and continues to have an identity in the country, and may not have been on a ballot, but is certainly still, as you say, a name brand, a name identity.
I mean, I think the identity of Kean's dad is a part of the broader Kean brand without necessarily being a continuing factor in his current political career. Right. I think he can succeed or fail entirely. Tom Kean Jr. can succeed or fail entirely on his own merits at this point in his career. That doesn't necessarily erase the fact that, the contours of his life have been shaped by the fact that he shares a name and a family with a beloved former governor, right? I think both of those things can kind of coexist.
And one of the things I find interesting about Tom Kean Jr. is he's more conservative than his father and his grandfather, but conservative. I mean, it's sort of conservative. These labels are in the eye of the beholder, because he's being painted as a Republican conservative, some say in this campaign, an extremist. But if he goes to Washington, I don't know that he's necessarily going to fit in with what some of his House colleagues might think a Republican should act like. Is that going to be if he gets there? Is that going to be a potential issue for him? And this is one of the things we should talk about after the election. But
well, that's a good point. But I could definitely see him being in some mold, more or less, the same way that Chris Smith and Jeff Van Drew have been at odds with their caucus from time to time, because their state is more centrist than much of the caucus states that are in the Republican caucus.
And one last question, unless anybody else has anything that they want to talk about with 7, but Tom Kaine's been criticized for not being out there as much, not talking to the press, not debating. To me, and I'm just one guy, but I look at a guy who's debated 3 times. I don't know how many more times he's expected to debate. I have no trouble reaching either of the Toms whenever I need to. So I don't understand those who complain otherwise. But has he run a good campaign?
He has, in my opinion, run the campaign of someone who has known from the beginning that he's probably ahead. I think that if from the beginning, it was like, wow, Malinowski is favored, but Kaine could really stage an upset here, the campaign would have looked very different. Because in order to run that kind of campaign, the sort of underdog campaign, you want to have media attention. You want to have profiles, and you want to talk to newspaper people, even if they're not going to endorse you. And you want to do these kinds of things. If you're already in an advantageous position, the way that Kaine was from the very beginning of the cycle, I fully understand the reasoning of, he hasn't been hiding. He also, I can just speak from personal experience as someone who has followed around a lot of candidates. He tells journalists where he's going to be a lot less than any other candidates. He's not sort of out there in quite that same way. But that's something that, it's his campaign did not need it. And it seems to have worked. So regardless of whatever we as journalists might sort of nitpick about, he has run the campaign that seems to have put him in a pretty favorable position.
This puts him very much in league with the view of other Republicans and probably other Republican staffers and strategists around the country, which is that there's not much to be gained from these interactions. And you can only hurt yourself, or they can hurt you. And in that way, I think he has a lot in common with other campaigns we've seen around the country where people don't think that they have anything to gain from interacting with the press. And the mainstream press isn't going to help you. They can only hurt you.
Yeah, and I think, this is, all 3 of us have worked on campaigns, and we see it from the other side. He's doing what he thinks needs to do to win, and he's out there meeting voters. He's just not doing it with Tom Moran following him around trying to wave his finger in his face. So maybe that's the right thing. And I'll say one last thing, and then I want to talk about District 3. Cut me off if you disagree with me, but Malinowski gets props for not bailing, for making this a really good fight. There's nobody who and I think I think there are signs right now that Kaine is leading, but there's nobody who's counting Tom Malinowski out. And I'll say this: if he wins re-election, he's done this on his own. This is his victory. The guy won't owe anybody anything.
Absolutely.
And that's not a bad place to be as a New Jersey politician.
And I think he's distinguished himself in other ways. For example, we follow all of these candidates. Other people may follow the candidate in their district, but by far, he's got the best answer of any Democrat on inflation. He says, look, did we vote for the spending packages? Absolutely. May that have had something to do with inflation right now? Absolutely. The alternative would have been far worse. We would have crashed the economy if we hadn't done this. And the way he articulates it and doesn't hide from it, doesn't run from it, and is I think, the clearest of any candidate in the state that I've seen.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about District 3. This is one and I'm gonna put the map up. But this is a district that was drawn in 2011 for Republicans. Right, in 2012, it was John Runyon, a freshman. They took Cherry Hill out. They shored it up. Huge bit of Ocean County was in it. Andy Kim flipped it was almost a tongue twister there, but Andy Kim flipped a Republican district, and now it's been changed. Joey, let me put it up and have you just sort of give an overview as to what kind of changes were made in this district.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, it was just sort of the thing for a few decades to have Burlington County, which is a blue-leaning big suburban county that kind of revolves around Philly, it sort of crosses the Pinelands and goes over into Ocean County, which is very red, sort of exurban, technically part of the New York metropolitan area, but it's really kind of its own thing of, very white, lots of retirees, Tom's River, places like that. So that was kind of the status quo for a while, as David was saying. And then Democrats this year decided, well, that's constantly making it harder for Democrats to win. So let's just take a hatchet to that. So what they did instead is they kept Burlington County almost completely whole. There's like 2 municipalities missing. Moved it up into the suburbs of Trenton. So Hamilton and Lawrence and East Windsor are the 3 biggest ones at sort of the top center there on the map. And then stretch it out into some sort of modestly Republican towns in Monmouth County that, probably won't vote for Democrats. Most of them probably won't vote for Democrats anytime soon. But the more important part is that they won't vote in crazy numbers for Republicans the way that a Tom's River does. So you end up with a district that it was formerly evenly matched. The old one that crossed from Burlington to Ocean was Trump plus like 0.1. So truly one of the closest districts in the country, to one that Joe Biden won by 14 points. So really, really a big shift. I think it might have been the biggest partisan shift of any district in the state. I'm not sure about that, but that might be true. And so it kind of, because of this new map, we sort of began the cycle thinking of Andy Kim as pretty much safe. I was looking back at the old story that we wrote when the map was first approved, and we said in the headline, or at least I said in the headline, map likely locks in 10-2 or 9-3 Democratic delegation for a while, with the assumption being that districts like this would usually vote for Democrats. And then now, so you got a Republican, Bob Healy, who has, by all accounts, made this into a real race. I did not necessarily see it coming a few months ago, but everyone kind of seems to acknowledge now that this is the other district in the state besides the 7th that's really competitive, that Kim is a really strong incumbent. He overperformed by a lot in both 2018 and 2020. But at the same time, it seems like Healy, Republicans might have found something pretty good in Healy. And so I don't really know how this race is going to go.
One thing, I should probably state the obvious. And if this was the old district in this cycle, and instead of it being parts of Mercer County, if it was still Ocean County, this would be a tough campaign for Andy Kim.
Yeah.
So while Tom Malinowski, may have not fared well in redistricting, I think Andy Kim did, and I think he's. This is a great race, and again, we don't have. All we're getting is anecdotal information from Democrats and from Republicans. I don't even. I've heard some poll numbers, but I haven't actually seen the polls, so I don't. I'm not gonna say those numbers, other than the fact that both sides acknowledge that this is a close race. And I mean, Micah, this is very much home, like home turf for you.
Yes.
What are you hearing from your regular friends, the ones who don't know who the Senate Minority Whip is? What are they saying about this race?
So the people, I live in a part of the district that's new to the district, and I can tell you that people are very much aware that in my part of the world, which is a particular part of the world, they're very much aware that there's been a change, that it's no longer going to be Chris Smith, and that it's either going to be Andy Kim or it's going to be a Bob Healy. And that's a big change because for 40 years in my part of the district, it's been the same congressman. So people are very aware that that's happening. There is a sense of excitement around that happening. Andy Kim has been around the district. He has not, taken it for granted. So he's been here at Ryder a couple of times. He has been in the towns near where I live, Allentown and Upper Freehold, several times, and so he's getting around. He's generating enthusiasm in Robbinsville as well, so it is something that people are aware of. I don't know whether it will generate more people coming out to the polls or not, but people know that this is a change. This is not the status quo election for them.
So, Joey, you wrote a great piece the other day about what can happen in this district, and you laid out really three options, which is at the end of the day, Andy Kim wins by a pretty good margin. Option number two is that Andy Kim wins narrowly, and option number three is that Bob Healy wins narrowly. There's not really a scenario by which Healy has a blowout. Tell me, why don't you walk through what those numbers look like, and what would Healy need to do in order to take Andy Kim out?
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote that story with, going back to my opening screed. There's a lot of uncertainty everywhere. This district in particular, though, just in the fact that we don't have we have very little publicly released polling data. We don't really know how the huge new chunks of the district are going to react to this race. Like Micah was saying, people seem to be aware of it, but I mean, who knows how they're going to vote in it, right? We have a record of Andy Kim running and winning in Evesham, but we don't have a record of him doing that in Hamilton. So I think that would be key to those new towns are key to any coalition. So, I mean, if you have Andy Kim do as well as he's done in the past in Burlington, and also do that well, or at least do as well as Joe Biden or something like that in the rest of the district, then he's completely fine, right? Then we're going to look like chumps for saying this is a super competitive race and he's going to win by 12 or something. And then, everybody moves on and he probably gets to be a congressman for as long as he wants, because if in this good Republican year and with a good Republican candidate, they still lose by a lot, then where can Republicans go from there? If on the other hand, you have the classic midterm effect where Kim's brand is, and the Democratic brand is fading in the same parts of the district that he's always represented, and he struggles to connect in the new parts of the district, then that's where you start to get really close races. If he's struggling in Hamilton, which voted for Joe Biden by like 11 points, and that's like 100,000 people, so that's a big chunk of voters. Mm-hmm. If you see Kim struggling there, or if you even see Healy flipping that's a big step towards very close race, or possibly a Healy upset.
Will we know the results of this election when we see Hamilton?
Say that again?
Will we know the results of this election when we see Hamilton? When
I mean, depends on what it is. If you see that Kim has won Hamilton by 10 points, yeah, you can call it. It's probably done.
Right.
If you see that Healy has won it by half a point, I don't know what that means. That could mean a lot of different things. That could lead to a lot of different results.
It's probably enough of a lift, but it could be. I mean, the Democrats I've talked to in Hamilton believe that if Hamilton is relatively even, or if Kim wins by a little bit, then they are fine in Hamilton. If Hamilton does no damage, that's what they think. Mm-hmm. Because then that preserves Kim's ability to do better in the parts of the district where he's done better,
which is really Burlington County. I mean, he is a Burlington County guy. And I got a lot of wrong adverbs. Ironically, Bob Healy, he's also from Burlington. He's from the exact same town as Andy Kim. Even I don't think they're quite neighbors, but they've referenced living down the street from one another. So they're pretty close. They probably have mutual friends and everything. So they in theory have similar political brands, although Morristown, where they're both from, leans blue, so it's probably gonna go for Kim instead of Healy. But yeah, I mean, Kim, he's very much a Burlington County guy. He won his first two races on the strength of Burlington. That's gonna be, he's got to just sort of do however well he can in the rest of the district. If he gets a powerful win in Burlington, then that's also lights out.
And let me
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Burlington. One other thing about Hamilton is that it was relatively even for Murphy last year in Chitterelli.
Can you put that map up, actually, David? The 2021 governor map.
Yes.
So,
Go ahead, talk about
By the
doing
way,
it.
if you want to see lots of these maps, you should check out the New Jersey Globe Voters Guide. I hear that they're all in there, and it's great.
I've got it open right now. Yeah, that's again where if he can match Murphy, which theoretically ought to be doable, right? And if Healy can match Jack, they feel like that's sort of 50-50. They can split the baby. Then then he can go on to the other parts of the district. That's how they feel. So they're not,
Okay, sorry.
but they also don't feel like it'll be where he gets buried in Hamilton.
You can kind of see from this map, though, just how, when things go wrong in a certain way for Democrats, how Republicans get to approximately 50% in this district, right? You can kind of, this is not that far from a winning coalition for Jack Ciattarelli in this district. And I will add, by the way, that there is no way that this map, the whole overall congressional map, was not drawn with Phil Murphy in mind. It seems very clear to me that the districts were specifically drawn such that even Phil Murphy was able to win them. Like, I think that was the justification for the way that this district, and also the 5th district, which we'll get to later, was drawn. So it's designed such that even when Republicans do surprisingly well, it'll still vote Democratic. The question is that we still really don't know is who's turning out next week? How are people going to react to Democrats overall? Is using 2021 as a baseline enough to preserve that Democratic advantage?
And anybody who says this district was not a gerrymandered district, they are wrong. I mean, and when you go from Bass River to Homedale, I think I said this when the map came out, New Jersey's never had a congressional district with more exits on the Garden State Parkway than this district. This one was.
You and I disagree. We talked about this on the radio a long time ago.
We disagree, but you're wrong. But that's okay. But, yeah.
Well, I agree with Micah more than you, David. So
yeah,
I don't know if this is a democracy. We're really big into democracy here.
Then you're both wrong. But I want to ask Micah Micah, who has now put his foot on the gas as a South Jersey geography expert. What is the effect of Pennsylvania politics on the 3rd district? Because everybody in the 3rd district watching network TV, they're seeing Fetterman and Oz ads, and they're seeing Mastriano, and they're seeing Josh Shapiro. They're hearing about Larry Krasner, the Philadelphia DA.
Right.
We heard about Larry Krasner, the Philadelphia DA, in the 3rd district congressional debate and crime in Philadelphia. And a lot of people in this district cross over and go into Philadelphia every day. Would it be naive of us to not take in consideration what the effect of the Pennsylvania elections are on this district?
Well, there's no question that, and I've talked to my students about this, more than any other district, they are getting pummeled with Pennsylvania ads in this district. And they're not so much geocached where, they're going for broke. And so they're getting everything. And it's just for this district. If you go for other districts, that's not so much true. But here, the Pennsylvania race is just 24/7. I will say that even the river towns, and I'm going to go back to Murphy on this, the towns that hug the river in this district are still largely blue last year in the Murphy year. That would not be the case if you went to the river towns along South Jersey or District 3, for example, Steve Sweeney's district. That would not be the case. So I don't think the identity here is so much tied to Philadelphia dissatisfaction the way that it is in the Deep South. I think there's a distinction. People don't necessarily feel like they're part of the city here, or they've moved from the city here. They still seem to be able to have voted for Murphy last year.
So I want to just jump ahead one thing, and then we'll come back to it. But just so we don't lose this point, are you saying, Micah, that what's happening in Pennsylvania will affect the the race for control of the Gloucester County Board of Commissioners?
Oh, I think it could. Yeah, I think Larry Krasner could. I think it's a big issue. I think it was a big issue last year, and I think it's a sleeper issue this year as well. Yeah, I think dissatisfaction with the way the city's being run and crime in the city is something that's being felt in South Jersey. Yeah, I do.
Okay, let's unless anybody else has anything about the third, let's
Can
go.
I throw in a couple? Can I throw in a couple closing
please.
thoughts? So
Yeah.
one thing I just want to quickly address the point about gerrymandering. I think this is a gerrymandered district in the sense that it was drawn in a very explicit way, such as to favor Democrats. I also think it's about as logical of a construction for the third district as the old one was, which combined it with Ocean County. Also has nothing really to do with Burlington County. So I think you're just taking sort of an illogical combination that benefited Republicans and switching it out for an illogical combination that benefits Democrats. So that would be my response to that. And then my one other point that I would make, and this is just sort of talking about the uncertainty again, but also how there is some level of a baseline that this congressional map has made. You could see quite a good night for Republicans overall. And you could see Tom Kane Jr. win by 11 points and Andy Kim win by half a point, let's say. You could see a very good night for Democrats overall and see Andy Kim win by 11 points and Tom Kane Jr. win by half a point. Those would have completely different, conclusions to be drawn from them. You would see completely different results around the country. But in New Jersey, the congressional delegation would be identical. So I think that something interesting this congressional map has produced is, and that's not to say that Malinowski can't win, that's not to say that Healy can't win, but this map has produced something kind of interesting where you could see a pretty wide range of overall results without having any districts actually change hands in between those ranges. And that's just the point that I kind of wanted to make as the conclusion to sort of 3 and 7.
And to that half a point scenario, I told you that I think Kim is working on clearly working those early numbers. He's got Democrats have 24,000 votes banked in this district over Republicans. That's the margin right now. Clearly, I think they'll hit 30, maybe even 35,000. If we say that 40 is a big number for Norcross, what's a big number for Andy Kim? And could that really weather a certain amount of Republican turnout on election day if the number is big enough?
Yeah, and one thing, and I mean this, I think people are going to say this a lot on election day, so we might as well, get it out now and start the ball rolling. But everybody ought to expect that when the first wave of election results starts to hit, when New Jersey Globe's working, is in a partnership with Decision Desk, the NJA is sponsoring. I'll put in that plug for our election results. We're going to have real-time election results coming from Decision Desk, and those first numbers everywhere, these are going to be Democratic numbers, and you're going to see out of the box the minute the vote by mail, what old guys like me still sometimes slip and call absentee ballots. But when that first wave of numbers comes out, you're going to see Malinowski ahead. You're going to see Kane ahead. Kim ahead. You're going to see Democrats ahead in most of these districts. So the thing is to just keep watching, because those are just the early votes, and that's not where if Republicans win, it's not going to be early. But let's go to the 5th district.
Before you do, just one more point about that. It's not about the third, but it's going to be dizzying, because in Pennsylvania, you're going to see the opposite, where the vote by mail is going to be late, and it's going to be more typical of what we've seen in New Jersey before. Since New Jersey has the new law that allows for the early counting, we can finally get those numbers in reasonable fashion. So we're back to the days where we're waiting for the machines. It's going to be a little disconcerting to see, in Pennsylvania, they're counting the machines first, and over here, we're getting the machines numbers now.
Red wave in Pennsylvania, blue wave in New Jersey. What's happening? No,
right.
just calm down.
Exactly. And this dates me, but all of us who've been around for a long time, I find myself missing that, the absentee ballot numbers at 4:00, because they don't do that anymore. They don't release any numbers, not even the guys in the Board of Elections, not even the county chairs. They don't release these numbers before 8:00 anymore. So we don't even get that to talk about all afternoon. All right, let's really go to the 5th. This is where Josh Gottheimer is seeking a fourth term in a district that, until he flipped it in 2016, had been Republican for since 1980, 36 years, and that district drawn for Republicans, and he won it 3 times. Now he is clearly got a district that's a little better. And Joe, I'm going to put that up on the screen, and maybe you could talk about what some of the changes have been in that district too.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of the inverse of the Malinowski district. It doesn't actually look that different from what we're accustomed to the 5th district looking like. But formerly it reached out further to the west to incorporate parts of Warren County, a little bit more of Sussex County. It's lost a lot of that now. And in exchange, you can see over in the east on all the little dark blue towns you can't really read the names of, now you've got all of Teaneck. Now you've got Hackensack. Now you've got, I forget exactly which ones were added and which one was already there, but Cliffside Park.
He's got Englewood, Fort Lee,
yeah.
Teaneck, and those, those were Pasquerel towns.
And so this is really just, I mean, the resulting district is, what it was before, which is Bergen versus everything else. But now Bergen makes up more of the district, and the portion of Bergen that's in the district is bluer. So that's unambiguously helpful to Gottheimer. Notably, this district was shored up a little bit less than Kim was and then Cheryl was. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to flip to the governor's race. If you just press the arrow on the right, I think it'll take you there. Yeah. Okay. So you can see it voted for Murphy by less than a point. So you can kind of see how in certain circumstances, Republicans can still win or come close to winning this district. I don't have complete access to their decisions. My assumption was always that they made this district a little bit like they didn't make this district as sort of razor blue as a couple of the others, is that Gottheimer is already a pretty impressive performer. And he also might not want the most razor blue district because he is pretty moderate. And he is almost like a better fit for a swing district than for a blue district. That was always my suspicion. I don't really know whether that's true. But anyway, the real point of this is that this is a bluer district than it was before. It still has the possibility to be red. And the biggest thing sort of hampering Republicans right now is that their nominee, Frank Pallotta, he's not the strongest nominee in the state. He's pretty conservative. He has very little money. And this is the sort of district, or this is the sort of race this year where it'll ride entirely on what the country overall is doing, if Republicans have a good night, this district could be in play, but that's not necessarily because Frank Pallotta forced it there, the way that Bob Healy kind of forced the 3rd district into play.
Yeah. This is, I like to explain this as like a lottery ticket that Republican nominees took out. And, if it's a lottery ticket for a red wave, and if there's a red wave that's strong enough, could they be pulled in by it? And the reason it would be pulling him in, and no disrespect to him at all, but you couldn't have a greater disparity in fundraising between one of the best fundraisers in the country and one of the worst fundraisers in the country. And so the ability to drive a message could not be more disparate between the two. David, you talked in the top of the show how we have some races where Republicans are able to spend more evenly, are able to hold even. That is certainly not the case here.
And Gottheimer, I mean, I've been calling him the human fundraising machine for a lot of years. And that doesn't just happen. I mean, the guy works it, and he works his district, and that's he's out doing these events. He's worked Sussex County pretty hard. He loses Sussex, but he doesn't lose Sussex by what Phil Murphy lost Sussex by, or what Joe Biden lost it by. There's a point, I guess, where how much more are you going to spend? Is it, at what point does it just sort of even out, or it's the wave? Gottheimer may turn out that he made some of his own luck here. He helped Frank Pallotta over the finish line in the Republican primary. Republicans thought they had a better candidate than Frank Pallotta, a guy named Nick DiGregorio, a Marine combat veteran, served in Afghanistan, served in Iraq. He had the line in Bergen County, but it didn't hold by enough. Would this be a different race if it was Nick DiGregorio?
I think it would. I mean, just thinking back to him, it's funny how much he reminds me of who Bob Healy is now, right? I think both of those candidates, they were, I mean, one is sort of the businessman track to Republican politics. The other is the veteran track to Republican politics. Those are two pretty big, swing district funnels into the political scene. And yeah, I think that absolutely right now, nominee Nick DiGregorio could be running a Healy-esque campaign and really forcing Gottheimer's feet to the fire, because he raised way more money than Pallotta did, and he certainly would have started raising even more had he become the nominee and started getting party support. And this district is a little bit redder than Kim's district, so I think you could have absolutely seen like sort of a top tier race, and the fact that Pallotta doesn't have the resources to make it that is the biggest impediment here.
Yeah, and when we talk about poor Frank Pallotta, and it's a double entendre with him. He's not poor Frank Pallotta. He put $1.4 million of his own money into a race against Gottheimer 2 years ago, and he's barely touched his own bank account for this race. It's sort of, it sort of baffles me. I mean, it either means he thinks that this wave is enough, that he doesn't have to spend his own money, or it's just not. I don't want to get into somebody's head that way in terms of what his finances are, his financial disclosure form, which is public. He's a wealthy guy. He's not John Corzine wealthy. He's not even Josh Gottheimer wealthy. But he got into this race now. He won the primary barely, and he's not putting any of his money in. What is
why compete for it? Why get it if you weren't going to do at least the effort that you did last time? It clearly is that lottery ticket. It clearly is if the red wave is strong enough, I'm going to get swept in.
And Gottheimer has painted him as an extremist, and it looks to be maybe more successful in doing so than Malinowski's been able to do with Kane, or Kim's been able to do with Healy. This
it's more accurate.
Yeah, and I don't, that the one, there was a quote, and he said it in a New Jersey Globe debate 2 years ago, before everybody had a different view of the Oath Keepers. He says, those Oath Keepers, they're good people. And Gottheimer has played that clip over and over and over and put a lot of money behind Frank Pallotta thinks that Oath Keepers are good people.
Yeah. But the only reason that's going to stick is because there's a complete void of answering it back. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing people are hearing or know about him, because there's no spending to argue it back, to dispatch another message to compete with.
One of the stunning moments of the Pallotta campaign, at least to me, was an interview that he had on the streets of Trenton with Joey Fox, where over the course of a day, I think that event started at 9 a.m. And by the end of the day, Pallotta was on his third position on abortion. And I was surprised that a guy who's been running for Congress for close to 3 years didn't have that down pat. Joey, why don't you talk about that a little bit, because that to me was a big moment in his campaign.
I mean, yeah, basically, of the four Republicans running in potentially competitive or potentially close Democratic districts, Pallotta was the only one who has taken a fairly strong sort of anti-abortion political position. Each of the four Republicans, and honestly, it's worth maybe talking about just a little bit, all of them, but each of the four Republicans has responded to the abortion issue in a little bit of a different way. And his was by far the most specifically, meat and potatoes Republican Party answer of life is precious and the sanctity of life is worth protecting, and we should have restrictions on abortion. Gottheimer was running ads saying Pallotta wants to ban abortion. I asked Pallotta, whether that's actually true, whether that's part of his plans. And he said, no, I don't think there should be a federal ban. David, you kind of caught that had gone against his previous position that he'd taken in the primary. It was a whole little snafu throughout the day. And then by the end of the day, he was back to saying, well, actually, I think there should be some level of federal ban on abortion.
He had a little phone call from Marie Tazy, the executive director of the New Jersey Right to Life, who heard that clip. And Marie has, I mean, I've known Marie over 20 years. She is, she has seen this dance before, where a candidate moves a little bit to more of a pro-life position in the primary and then moves back to the center for the general. My personal opinion, she didn't allow him to do that. She called him out on it. I think that he was in a position by the end of the day where he thought he was going to lose the endorsement in New Jersey Right to Life. And
so he kept the endorsement of New Jersey Right to Life, and he also kept a position that's probably out of step with like 60 to 65% of his district voters. And so that's just sort of, I mean, that's the rub for Republicans. And
he moved more to the right on abortion by the afternoon than he was in the morning when he tried to moderate himself.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't discount too. And I clearly it was not a deliberate strategy here, so I'm not suggesting that. Yeah. But remember, I mean, there are a lot of candidates who are taking a lot of different positions. And I know that Kane has wound up with one, but he didn't start there either. He started by telling one group of people he believed in the sanctity of life and telling another group of people he believed in women's right to choose. So it's this is not so unusual for Republican candidates this year to try to be all things to all people on this issue.
Yeah. So I mean, the two other, just so that we can have complete coverage here, the two other Republicans, I think, in my personal opinion, just sort of observing this and seeing, the consistency, have had slightly more convincing answers, just in terms of, they have found a niche on the position. So Paul DeGroot, running as Micah Sherrill, we'll talk about that district in a second, has identified himself as a pro-choice Republican. He said that very explicitly. I talked to his chief of staff and his family actually at a Rovember rally in Montclair. It was a Micah Sherrill rally. It was very Democratic, but they, to their credit, still turned up and said, here's a pro-choice alternative who will fight against crime and whatever other Republican priorities. He's also said, though, that Dobbs was the correct decision, that it should be left up to the states. So Sherrill's hit him anyways with the correct statement that he thinks it's okay if other states ban abortion. So you've kind of got a bit of a tricky situation there. And then Healy has basically said, I'm personally pro-life, but I wouldn't touch whatever New Jersey wants to do in Congress. And I don't know whether voters will find that more convincing, that he's saying that he's specifically pro-life, but it's not his priority. But notably, it feels like it's less of an issue in the 3rd district than it is in the other 3 districts. Andy Kim has not made it into the same kind of key campaign issue the way that the other Democrats have. So, I mean, make of that what you will. That could just be the way that Kim is running his campaign. But I think that's interesting, that you've got Pallotta, who, he's got his pretty conservative positions. Of the remaining 3, the only one who has said he is pro-life is also the only one who seems to have kind of settled into an approximate equilibrium on the question. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't know. Frank Pallotta, he just reminds me, and I've said this a bunch of times, he just reminds me, for better or for worse, of that guy at his kid's Little League game, who's standing up yelling at the 15-year-old umpire. It just there's something there, for a Wall Street guy, for a wealthy guy, there's something there that I just haven't quite figured out yet. And the question is, will we ever need to figure that out? Is Josh Gottheimer going to win this? Is he going to win it impressively? Is he going to win it closer than usual because of the type of cycle it is? What do you guys think it's going to be?
Because of the cycle. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Joey. Closer because of the cycle. But again, the reason I feel less conflict or pulling, or you're making the wrong call here, not that we're making predictions, but I just feel like when one side is communicating and is doing voter contact and is reaching out and is communicating a message that you're getting, and the other side is not, that's got to have a dramatic impact. That's got to be something that's got to be overcome, and it would take a pretty strong red wave to overcome that kind of a disparity in messaging.
And Micah, Joey and I had a conversation yesterday. You weren't in on it, so but the question was, what's a close race? right? If you win a race 53-46, is that a close race? Is 52-47 is a 5-point win? Is that close for a Democrat this cycle in a district where Phil Murphy narrowly won?
Well, I mean, if you think about it in terms of less abstraction and more concretely, what is so close that it's going to draw opponents? It's going to draw opponents that are going to potentially run against you in the primary next time, or run against you in the general next time. How much of a margin does it take to intimidate somebody? And I guess the answer there is you have to win by 5 points, right? If it's closer than 5 points, it's a relatively close race. I mean, really close race is 1 or 2 points, right? So I mean, I think nobody's going to get greedy this week, right? A win is a win is a win, but
Yeah.
but I think I mean, in terms of practical impact, you want to continue to. Clearly, Gottheimer likes to scare away his opponents. That's why he's got $14 million sitting in the bank.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
don't know if
I
it's
think that
in the bank because he has spent money on this campaign. So, but he's got a lot of money, and I'll tell you, even since I last spoke about this with Joey, I've been thinking a lot about what's a close race. I'll tell you where I think I have settled in today, and that is a good win is that you go to bed on election night knowing you've won the election.
Okay, fair enough.
And a close race is when you're waiting until Wednesday or Thursday or whenever John Curry decides that he's going to tell the Board of Elections to open up and start counting some votes. A close race is when you go a couple days and you're not really sure. Is that?
Yeah.
It's Joey. That's not what we talked about yesterday. Is that?
No, I mean, I think that's right. I think it's also a helpful reminder to people that there may be one or more races on the congressional level or on a lower level in New Jersey that we are going to have to go to bed with question marks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll also just say on the close race discussion, a lot of it is contextual based on how other districts in the state and around the country go. If Republicans are winning 250 seats and Gottheimer wins by 5 points, that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
If Democrats hold the House and Gottheimer wins by 5 points, that's terrible. So, I mean, it's sort of
Okay.
a lot of how the narratives of these different races will be written. It's both within the races themselves and how they compare to other races around the country. That's how you kind of judge how incumbents did, how strong they were, how strong challengers were.
Republican night or bad Republican night or good Democrat. Yeah.
So let's talk about District 11, a Republican district for 34 years until Mikey Sherrill and Siley Avalenda and the group at NJ11 for Change, got Rodney Frelinghuysen to come out from under his desk long enough to announce that he's not going to run again. I mean, this was a Republican district that she flipped. Joey, why don't if you would just sort of go through what some of the changes are there?
Yes, I mean, I'll quickly start by saying Mikey Sherrill's performance in this, that is definitely not her district.
That is not it. No.
She would love to run in that district.
She would. I can call that district right now, but let me get it. I'm sorry.
Mikey Sherrill's win in 2018 is like one of the most impressive House performances I've ever seen. I mean, she won that thing by, I think it was 14 points. That's crazy. That was a district Trump won by 1. That was a district the Republicans are represented forever. I mean, it's pretty nuts. So she is certainly not someone to be trifled with. Yeah. And then Democrats on the redistricting commission said, well, we're going to make extra sure that no one trifles with you. They turned her district. I forget exactly what his numbers were before. They were Biden plus, I don't know, 5, something like that, 5 or 6. Now it's Biden plus 17. That is really intimidating. That is something that Republicans are going to have everything go right in order to flip. I mean, we rated it in our voters guide as likely Democratic. Most other forecasters have it as safe Democratic. We're maybe even being too friendly to Republicans on this. I mean, this is a tough district to win. You've got, I mean, you can see kind of in the little county inset how in 2020 Biden won Morris County. He didn't even need to win Morris County because the Essex County portion of the district is just so blue.
Right.
You've got Montclair, you've got Bloomfield, you've got Millburn, you've got Maplewood, you've got South Orange. So this is the kind of thing where you've got an impressive incumbent in Mikey Sherrill. You've got an opponent, Paul DeGroot, who I think has run a pretty good campaign, all things considered, with the big exception being that he hasn't raised much money. So Sherrill has gone on the airwaves with a lot of ads. DeGroote has barely responded. It would take a lot for this district to flip.
I look at places. I mean, she was able to get Milburn away from Malinowski. She got
her former opponent, Rosemary Becky, can now actually vote in the race.
Yes, and South Orange and Maplewood came from Donald Payne's district. What we're talking about in this in this little dark blue corner here is this is huge Democratic terrain. And more importantly, I guess for Cheryl, is these are high propensity voters. These are voters that are coming out to vote. This isn't knock and drag. This is they're coming out on their own. These are I sometimes call them the hell towns, which is highly educated liberal leaning, and liberal leaning is an understatement. I mean, these are strongly progressive towns. Biden won it, and I'm going to go over to I mean, when you look at the governor's race that year, I mean, or last year, I mean, Phil Murphy won this, in what was a tough year for him. Look at the dark blue in that corner. And she's also picked up Dover, which is a strongly Democratic town. This again is an issue where Mikey Sherrill has made, this is a campaign where Mikey Sherrill has made abortion a pretty big issue. DeGroote is, and Joey talked about it a few minutes ago, but this is part of what the voters have to figure out. DeGroote is a self-proclaimed pro-choice candidate who supports the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe. He supported the Dobbs decision, and he supports states' rights, which means, and I'm now just repeating what the Democratic argument against him is if you think that it's okay for Texas and Mississippi and some red states to ban abortion entirely, you can't say you're pro-choice. The question is, can DeGroote, this is my question. I'll start with Micah, because Joey talked about it a little before. Can you be pro-choice when you have that feeling about the role of the federal government there? Well,
I watched the debate between them, and DeGroote is a very nice man in a way, and is very, very well stated positions, very mainstream positions. In a way, this was a throwback to a debate that you could have watched between two mainstream candidates for both parties 20 years ago, in which there wasn't like an enormous amount of clash. They talked about differences on abortion. They talked about differences on inflation, but it wasn't movement conservative stuff. It wasn't MAGA stuff. He's definitely much portraying himself as, carving out a more mainstream position. But the question is that enough? Can he get enough traction on her that way? Or is there anything to suggest that he can get more traction than Jack Ciattarelli did, right? Who lost the district by 4.2, right? I have a hard time seeing where he distinguishes himself enough on any of these positions. Again, what it would take is to get swept up in a wave type situation.
And that's I guess the whole campaign. That's what Mikey Sherrill and her team is working towards, is making sure that if it's the kind of election where Republicans are overperforming everywhere, that they're winning 40, north of 40 House seats, that this isn't the kind of district who falls. I want to ask a question. This is a question where Mikey Sherrill's campaign manager, Jackie Burns, is going to hear this. She's going to groan. Whoever's with her, listen to it. She's going to groan. If Mikey Sherrill runs for higher office in the next couple of years, is this a competitive district if it's an open seat?
Depends on a lot of things, in my opinion. Depends on whether Republicans try to emphasize it. Depends on, if it's, say, a special election that happens under a Republican president. No way. And it depends on how strong the Democrat is who runs to replace her. I mean, this is the kind of district that, as I sort of said in my little bit of an intro, that everything has to go right. And you could see a situation where if this seat is open, everything could go right. But, as that phrase implies, it's tough. It's tough to get everything to align in such a way that a district like this could flip. And it was drawn to be sturdy. I mean, Democrats on the commission, as much as they beefed up Kim and Gottheimer, they really, really strengthened this district. It is tough for Republicans to flip. You get, if Democrats are getting, like I was looking at how many net votes Murphy got in Maplewood and Montclair alone, it's like 15,000.
Yeah, no, this district, it was built deliberately this way. And, you say that, and I should add the disclaimer paid for by the committee to reelect Leroy Jones, because, this is his home turf. This is his county, and he wants that congressional seat.
And he'll probably keep it. I mean, it's very slightly on the board. DeGroot, as I said before, it's sort of as personally is a fairly strong candidate. I could definitely see him running for other things down the line. But yeah, it's tough. The math is really tough for Republicans here.
Democrats have 22,000 votes banked here already. Early votes banked over a margin. I should say have 22,000 more votes banked than
net.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So let's talk about some of the other districts, which for those of you watching will not take as long. But there are four that I want to.
4 hours about Donald Payne.
I know we can, and you never know what kind of wave is going to be there, right? But let's talk about four districts at the same time, because I've said this to both of you in the last couple of days. You're talking about Donald Norcross, Frank Pallone. You're talking about Bill Pascrell, maybe Bonnie Watson Coleman, all strongly favored to win, and maybe it would take a lot for any of them to fall. I would be shocked. It would be Ed Durr like if one of them didn't have it, which means you never know. But I don't read Joey's voter guide. We will walk you through these things. But
it would be even crazier than Ed Durr.
Yeah, because the numbers may not be there in a lot of these. But the question I have is are we looking at the possibility that for the first time, for a lot of them, either in a very, very long time or ever, fall under 60% because of this wave? Is it possible that Frank Pallone wins, but he's in the he's in the mid 50s, or Pascrell, who tends to be in the mid to high 60s, is 10 points left. And by the way, no shame at all in winning a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives by a 57-42 margin. You win by 15 points. That's a big win. But are we seeing some changes here in terms of climate and redistricting that might reflect maybe a little bit less of a margin than they're accustomed to?
Absolutely. And I think that it's the same stuff that's happening with, say, the Gottheimer district, just in a bluer district, right? We're talking about the Gottheimer district and we're saying, well, in a good Republican year, you could see how this district could get very close. In these other districts that are bluer to begin with, you could say, well, in a pretty good Republican year, you could end up with a 10-point margin instead of a 20-point margin. And I mean, that's partially the design of the Democratic map, right? It was designed so that the people in vulnerable districts would be a little bit safer. Oftentimes, a necessary trade-off from that is making the people in safer districts a little bit more vulnerable. So like in the Pascrell district in particular, in order to help out Gottheimer, he traded out some towns and then made the district redder. That trade could mean that Bill Pascrell wins with 56 or 57% of the vote. Pretty significant fall from, his usual 65, 70%, whatever it is. But that doesn't affect him being a congressman. And what it probably would do is help Josh Gottheimer also continue to be a congressman. So yeah, I mean, I would be flabbergasted if any of those seats flipped. I know we've already talked about this on our phone call. I wouldn't even count Bonnie Watson Coleman's district in this group. She is truly, fully, utterly safe. The other three, yeah, I mean, you might see some slightly weirdly close results on election night just because of the way the districts are built. But we'll see.
But by the way, defining close is relative, right? And we're not talking about 5 points close. We're talking about somebody who used to win by 15 or 20 is winning by, by 10 or 12. It's not really close. Micah, you feel free to beg off this, but just for fun.
Yeah, no, the one that you would be tempted to say is really ripe, but I don't see it, is the first district, is Norcross's district, because Jack Ciattarelli hit 60% in that district last time. So you want to say that, but on the other hand, you're talking about Norcross, and you're talking about a guy who's got 40,000 votes net right now in the bank. You want to say, if any Republican can crack it, replicating Jack in that district would do it. I just don't know if Gustafson can do that.
Ciattarelli lost that district by 14 points. I didn't know what do you mean by that?
You're talking about you're leaving out Camden in that. You're looking at the Gloucester.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
yep, you're right.
So Micah, if you had to rank those, and by the way, Frank Pallone, he's got the best. He's got he's running against a known entity, Sue Kiley, right. a county commissioner, former mayor. She is somebody who's gotten votes out of Monmouth County before, never in Middlesex.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm seeing with Pallone, and I definitely see it with Norcross also, but Pallone never, ever, ever, and I've been watching Frank Pallone since he ran for the Long Branch Council in 1982 and beat Brian Kennedy for the state Senate in 1983. This guy runs scared even when he doesn't have to. He is perpetually nervous about running for office. He's running the kind of campaign that somebody runs when they're frightened. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. He's working, he's doing mail, he's up on television.
Right. And Donald Norcross is doing that too. He's also spent, both Norcross and Pallone have spent quite a bit, given that their districts are not rated competitively and that their opponents have very little money.
Yeah, and that's a point worth making. And you could probably say the same thing across the country, right? A lot is being made out of, protecting safe seats, and that must mean that everybody's vulnerable. No, it means that you've got incumbents that want to make sure that they're going to win and want to pull out all the stops and don't want to leave any skin on the field and want to make sure that by the time they get to election day, they've done everything that they can. And so you're seeing, sure, lots of incumbency protection, which is what they're going to do.
Yeah. I happen to think if Pallone was unopposed, he'd still be up on, he'd still be doing stuff, worried about whether
Pallone, our congressman.
Yeah, whether there's some write-in candidate that might come in the last couple of days. That's how he has established his brand in Monmouth County over the years. But Kylie's a good candidate.
She is. But here's what I'll say. You can definitely accuse me of reading too much into early numbers, because early numbers never tell us what's going to show up on election day. Always give it that caveat. We have no idea. But I will say that having watched early numbers now for several cycles, when Monmouth is fired up, as they were in the state legislative races last time, or in the county races last time, they are cranking out the early vote. They are cranking out the in-person early vote. So far, we're not seeing much signs of life in Monmouth County from the early vote. We're not seeing anything outside of the norm from Republicans in Monmouth that would indicate to me that they are firing up the machine for her.
So I put up the Murphy Ciattarelli numbers in District 6. I mean, this is, this Middlesex part in here, that is heavy Democrat.
Yeah, and, you get Piscataway and New Brunswick and Edison in there. That's just, and Perth Amboy. That's a lot of votes that you can just sort of count on in the bank.
Yeah, Pallone, and Pallone only won Monmouth by 5 points 2 years ago, but the Monmouth part, correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, has become more Democratic in redistricting.
Yeah, I mean, it just, like, you know, when Republicans drew the map last decade, they left some Democratic towns in the 4th district and they left some Republican towns in the 6th district. Democrats this year just kind of made both districts more efficient. Basically, they sort of they nipped and tucked in ways that, you know, now Palone has Neptune Township, and things like that give him just that much more of a boost.
Maybe, just maybe, I have no confirmation on this, that the fact that the Democratic chair of congressional redistricting, Janice Fuller, had formerly been Frank Pallone's chief of staff, maybe that had something to do with it here.
No, I don't buy it.
Yeah,
that's not how New Jersey politics works, David. What are you talking about?
but so we're looking at these 4 districts being you know, Democratic. They're you know, it would take a miracle for these to flip. But Micah, you know, I'm going to try and put you on a spot here. Give me those 4 incumbents from lowest percentage to highest percentage.
All right, let's see.
Whether we agree.
Yeah, I would have to say the lowest percentage is going to be Pallone. The next is going to be Pasquale. The third is going to be Norcross, and the 4th is going to be Bonnie.
Completely agree. Go on.
All right.
Then I must agree. So let's go through the other House seats, and we'll go south to north. I mean, Jeff Van Drew, you know, the district got a little better, but I mean, Van Drew, to me, safe.
I mean, this is to me the inverse of like a Pallone or a Norcross, where it's a district that, I guess, under the right circumstances, you might have something, and the Democrat, so the Democrat running is Tim Alexander. He's a former prosecutor. You know, he excited some Democrats at the beginning. There were people who are thinking, you know, maybe not that he was going to win this year, but that he was going to make it a real race, have a potential political future in front of him. He has not run the kind of campaign that's impressed anybody, really. I mean, he just like some of these Republicans in the tough districts, he has raised very little money. He hasn't campaigned in a way that would really swing anybody in particular away from Van Drew. I mean, Van Drew won by 7 points his first time as a Democrat, 6 points his second time as a Republican. He's going to double that at least this year. I mean, it's hard to see how he doesn't. And this district, I mean, it's trending away from Democrats anyways. So that already makes it tough. Would you mind putting up the map for this one too?
Yeah. I'm sorry, say it again.
Would you mind putting up the map for the 2nd district as well?
Sure. I mean, this one has, you want president or governor?
Let's do governor, because it really shows how good Republicans can do with their modern coalitions in this district. Because, I mean, you've got Vineland, which sometimes votes modestly blue, a vote for Jack Ciattarelli by a little bit. You've got Atlantic City, which votes Democratic. And then you've just got this sort of sea of town after town after town that votes Republican. And especially for Jack Ciattarelli, voted incredibly Republican. So there's just not much upside for Democrats in this district right now.
You are respectfully, because you're a master at this stuff, Joey. But that one comment shows you how, and David, you will have to agree with this. It shows you how far we've come in such a short amount of time. That we would, I mean, you know, Vineland, Millville, Bridgeton, when those 3 urban areas are firing, plus Atlantic, should be a formidable combination for Democrats.
Yeah.
And they've been neutered for the time being.
Well, and it's a combination of Van Drew, and it's a combination of the power of Michael Testa.
It is, but it's beyond personalities, right? It's the way that South Jersey, part of South Jersey's trending away from Democrats' personality, but part of it is very much, you know how I feel. Van Drew saw this coming. He saw the movement coming. He saw the cultural changes going. This is as much like other parts of the country and parts of the South as anywhere gets in New Jersey. And, you know, so yes, they led the way, but they also saw this coming.
Yeah. So here's, and I should say also, I agree with you, Joey. You know, Mark Alexander has just, Tim Alexander. I'm sorry, I was thinking of District 34. But Tim Alexander has. I mean, just this is just not. This is not a good introduction to politics for him. I don't know that we're going to see him again. What has surprised me is that, I mean, through October, he's announcing endorsements from North Jersey Democrats that nobody knows down there, and I'm not seeing Alexander hammering Van Drew. Micah, what I agree with you here. I mean, this is, the book is not closed on Jefferson Van Drew, and what is going to be interesting here is here was a guy who got to Washington, a member of the Democratic caucus, and he didn't fit in. He didn't fit in from day one. This was not Trenton for him. This was, this was not who he liked. And so, he ripped the Band-Aid off. He switched parties. And there's a decent chance, we don't know yet what Tuesday is going to bring nationally, but there's a decent chance that Jeff Van Drew is going to be a member of the majority where he might be part of a group of really swing congressmen who will, working with Chris Smith, who we'll talk about in a second, maybe with Tom Kane, maybe with Bob Healy, maybe with a Republican in Maine and in Rhode Island, sort of this northeastern, I don't want to even say moderate, but right of center group that might be a check and balance over that caucus. I predicted Kevin McCarthy, if he's speaker, this group that I just talked about, that's going to be that's going to be something he's going to have to manage.
I think that's very much true of Chris Smith. I think it's true if Kane wins and if Healy wins. I mean, Van Drew has, he sort of takes his moderate votes where he sees them, where he sees fit. But he's also, I mean, he's less moderate on a lot of things than even Chris Smith is in a safe district. The big one to me is that he voted against the certification of the election. That's like a real.
That is a big issue. It's a big
price for that.
Yeah,
it is. So let's talk about Chris Smith.
Soon to be dean of the House if New Jersey has any luck.
Yeah, and so much. I mean, he could be dean in the House for a very long time,
20 years.
I mean, this guy is in this election is safe. I mean, and one thing, and
this is where we have to point out that he and Jeff graduated together, right? So they're
yeah. Except I have to point out that Smith is younger than Van Drew.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, so Chris Smith, you go, I mean, I remember him in 1978, 25-year-old guy running for in a district where he was a sacrificial lamb. He gets into a race that he could not win. He puts his foot down on the gas. He floors that gas pedal, and for 44 years he has not taken the foot off the gas.
Well,
it's just he just keeps going and going and going, and he's underestimated all the time.
I will say, and I've got to go back to Van Drew's Democrat days to say this, but that's very much the story of Van Drew in Cape May County, right? I mean, the only Democrat at all, right? And just never looked back and never stopped and just wouldn't take no for an answer. Just kept on outworking. They really do have a similar approach in a lot of ways to their politics.
Yeah, and this is old school congressman. This is casework all the time, and over and over and over, and this is a guy who, I mean, when he started out, he was living, he was in Old Bridge, representing a district that included the city of Trenton, and now he's in Ocean County. He's been redistricted out of his district a couple of times. This is a hardworking guy, and that pays off.
There's two things. One, if you look at almost any community in the central part of the state, he's represented it. So much so that when they threw this new district at him, it turned out he had already represented like half of the new towns in the district before.
Yeah.
So it's you can't throw anything new at the sun. under the sun at the guy because he's been around for so long and he's worked it so hard. The other thing, since we're talking about casework, my favorite story is I'm with my kids trick-or-treating down the street. The elderly Democratic chair of the town has a Chris Smith sign on her lawn, the Democratic chair. And I said to her, Mrs. Schmidt, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I've got to do that. Every year I've got to do that. She said, I vote how I want to vote, but I've got to put the sign up. I said, why? And she said, you see that mailbox on the side road, not on the main street? Post office wouldn't let me do that. And Chris Smith made them let me post the mailbox on the side road. So I've got to help him out in every election. This is Democratic chair of the town.
Yeah.
That tells you something about the casework and the value of the casework. You and I have speculated before, and you may know more about it than I do, but it's got to be in the tens of thousands that he's helped out.
I would think so. He's running against a guy named Matt Jenkins. I could have preferred to, I could have pretended to have to look the guy up to remember the name. I mean, this is the weakest candidate he's running against in a long time. The guy doesn't have any money. I've only spoken to him once. It was for about a minute and a half, and he tried to feign that he didn't understand why his ELEC report wasn't filed, but didn't know how much money he had raised. And it was, this one's, Joey, this is a landslide race.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll push back a little bit on. I feel like once you get to races that are safe like this, you know what? I appreciate Matt Jenkins for running. I also appreciate Marcos Arroyo for running in the 8th district and David Pinckney for running in the 10th. Yeah. Giving voters a choice, even when the outcome is pretty much guaranteed, still a really good thing. I'm very glad. There's 30% of people in this district, probably at minimum, who are going to want to vote for a Democrat. And I'm glad for their sake that Matt Jenkins exists for them, just the same way that I'm glad for the 20% of people who are Republicans up in North Jersey that they've got someone too.
Jose Arango.
Democracy, we don't have a choice. We don't, if somebody who doesn't run against, we don't have a democracy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, it strikes me as something that Jose Arango said to me, not too long ago. He said that sacrificial lambs are the unsung heroes of a political party, because somebody's got to do it. And I agree with you, but then we can move on. But I'll add one thing on about sacrificial lambs. The most important thing about being a guy who takes on the good fight for his or her party in an unwinnable race is that they have to know that they're not going to win. And sometimes candidates, I saw it with Stephanie Schmid 2 years ago in the 4th district. Sometimes they don't realize that they're not going to win, and they become huge amounts of stress to the party, to the point where party leaders are looking at a candidate. And I've seen this over and over the years. They're looking at the candidate and they're saying, we'd have been better off with nobody than this person who's out there now bashing us and working against us and bad mouthing us. And so a sacrificial lamb, yeah, they're heroes, but they have to know that, they're in it for that reason.
I guess that they so often wind up being attorneys who want to be named judge someday, right?
Yeah. And oftentimes they end up running for like this is not a New Jersey example, but a story that I kind of like is the woman who ran against Mitt Romney in Utah in 2018 is now the mayor of all of Salt Lake County in Utah. So, oftentimes, when you have this completely hopeless race, that's the kind of thing that sets you up to then be like, wow, you really fought that fight.
Yeah.
And then
John Adler comes to mind.
See that for Matt Jenkins. I don't necessarily see that for a lot of the people running in New Jersey this year.
Yeah. John Adler comes to mind. He ran against Jim Saxton and then went on to win a state Senate seat and have a long career in the Senate, and then
succeeded by none other than Jim Saxton.
And then succeeded Saxton. So yeah, it does happen. So we've been through. Let's go to the 8th district. Rob Menendez. This is sad. I'll put it up just because Joe. Just to show everybody what this district looks like. But any doubt Rob Menendez is going to win this and win it big?
This is the only district in the state where every town voted the same way, which I think is kind of an interesting stat. It's to me, the stories of the 8th and 10th district, they're different in a lot of ways, but they're linked in some ways, where you're soon going to have both. I mean, so it's New Jersey's one Hispanic majority district and it's one Black majority district. Come 2023, both Congress people are going to be the sons of previous representatives from the district. You had both Rob Menendez in the 8th district and Donald Payne Jr. in the 10th district face down a primary that, looked like it might develop at one point in primary season, but both won with actually the exact same percentage of the vote, 84% of the vote. And now I think the question in both, and I realize maybe I'm linking them too much here, but I think the question in both is, what is a brand new Congressman Menendez and a sort of new and improved Congressman Payne? What are they going to look like? How are they going to behave in Washington? What is going to be their position in this Democratic caucus that looks like it, more likely than not will be in the minority? How will that go down? And I'm very curious to see with both of them, especially with Menendez. Jersey City, very progressive. Some of these towns, very progressive. Other of the towns, very Latino, maybe less sort of ideologically progressive. How is he going to represent that? What is he going to be? He's not going to be a squad member most likely, but where on that spectrum does he fall? Very curious for all of that.
Yeah. And District 10, Donald Payne, I sometimes am always hesitant to make a prediction, but I got to tell you, I like Donald Payne's chances next Tuesday. I really do. I think I think he's looking at a potentially comfortable win here. I mean, this is a district that the last Republican to have this seat was 19. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my phone, and I'm going to deliberately do this. I won't say who it is, but the county chairman who's calling me now clearly is not watching this live stream, and he or she will hear from me on that. But this district has not been represented by Republicans since Fred Hartley of Taft-Hartley in 1948. I mean, this is as democratic a district as you can get. And let me just put that up for everybody for a second. And Payne, and Joey wrote about this in his voter guide. Payne was tested. He had a primary challenge, and all of a sudden he started raising money at a furious pace, and he was out campaigning. And one of the things I noticed is he sort of liked it. He said, "Wow, this isn't so bad. I like going out there and talking about what I'm doing in Washington and what's happening and what I'm working on."
Was this during the primary? Because
during the primary.
Yeah, I mean, this is where he actually had to roll up his sleeves and not rely on the party delivering in the general election, and he did it, pretty impressively,
like 80-something% of the vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Against a candidate who I think it's noteworthy didn't, Payne got the endorsements of his opponent's last 3 employers.
And you can't say that about every member, every public official from a safe area, that they know how to win, that they know how to roll up their sleeves and go out there and win. So kudos to him for getting it done.
Progressives started to look at his record and say, "Wow, he's really, really good on our issues." He had New Jersey working families endorsed him. So he's almost, because he had that primary, I think he's better positioned than ever going back into a new Congress. Now, that being said, and this is, we shouldn't spend a lot of time on it, but the only drama in this district is how he's going to do in Cranford and Roselle Park and Kenilworth and Essex Fells and Caldwell. He's running against a guy named David Pinkney, who his county chairman, Al Barless, will say is one of our unsung heroes, a guy who agreed to put his name on the ballot and has waged no campaign. I don't know, maybe Pinkney can win a couple of these towns. The only reason, the reason I'm leading into this, and we may talk about it later, is Caldwell's in that district. And this is, to me, one of the most striking stories of congressional redistricting, is that the argument was made, let's put Caldwell in with Newark as communities of interest because the Essex County College based in Newark has a suburban campus in Caldwell. And so they said, sure, and they put it in, and nobody, the tiebreaker's office didn't fact check that. And there was a mistake made. In reality, the suburban campus of the county college is in West Caldwell. Now Caldwell's got Donald Payne as their congressman for 10 years, and this is a swing town in a local race where control of mayor and a majority of the council's at stake. And it may very well be I happen to think Republicans are positioned to win that anyway, but for the next 10 years, they don't have Mikey Sherrill at the top of their ticket. And that, that's just sort of an unintended consequence of what happened with one redistricting mistake. So there you have it. I mean, it's, we're going to, start talking about some local races, but we're, just to summarize it, we're watching 7. We think as a group, the royal we here, just to make sure that I'm explaining it right and speaking for all of us, we think the 3 is going to be potentially the closest race in New Jersey that night, followed by 7, followed by 5, followed by 11.
Fair enough.
I could see maybe 5 being closer than 7. I also think there's an argument to be made that 7 is more competitive than 5. That's kind of splitting hairs. But
yeah. All right, so let's.
I think that's the basic. I think really just look at 3 and 7 on election night, and if something is going crazy nationwide, start looking at other districts too. I think it's kind of the Cliff Notes.
So let's talk about some countywide races. Let's start with the 2 counties, and God bless everybody that is still with us, the true political junkies. That's why we do this. But let's talk about the 2 places where Republicans think they can win control of county government this year, which is Cumberland and Gloucester. I mean, Micah, you grew up in Vineland.
Yeah.
You've seen this county seesaw back and forth for your entire life.
Exactly. Yes.
Never been a one-party county.
That's exactly right, and it's the complete aberration, right? It's that and Salem at this point are really the only places where we can say that happens. And I would say Republicans have the wind at their back. I would say that Michael Testa wants this very much, and he's working hard.
State senator who's also the county chairman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have Nick Acelta's former chief of staff, or former staffer, who is one of the candidates who's running. Yeah. Vineland, which is the largest community by far in the county, you have a Republican mayor, Anthony Fanucci, who would love to see this happen. Hasn't always been an option. Hasn't been something where they really had the potential to make a serious run. They have had control, but but this feels different. This feels like this could be a long-term thing, right? This feels like where do the Democrats come back from here if this happens?
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing the Democratic upside in either of these counties. I'm going to be honest. I mean, you've got the trends on one hand. You've got the fact that all of Cumberland and most of Gloucester is in the 2nd congressional district, where Democrats are probably going to get pretty wiped out. I mean, it's just like, the fact that a lot of Democratic incumbents are running, that buoys them a little bit. But as you and I were talking about earlier today, David, a lot of these county level races, especially for county commissioner, I mean, they're sort of generic ballot tests. Voters don't necessarily, except in certain circumstances, they don't necessarily have a lot of personal connections with your average county commissioner or county surrogate or something. These are positions that sort of exist down ballot, and voters will vote for them every time, but maybe not go much deeper than that in terms of learning who's on their ballot.
Yeah. I interrupt you for
so in that kind of situation,
yeah,
you've got Jeff Van Drew winning Cumberland by 6, and you've got Gloucester, I don't know, it's split between 2 congressional districts, but let's say it votes for Republicans by 8 overall, something both very reasonable. That's tough for Democrats down the ballot to really get across that hump, because they can't really count on that many voters being like, oh, wow, I just love Commissioner Denise DiCarlo. I got to vote for her. That's a tough proposition to convince voters of.
Yeah. So
we have had freeholders, and I can say that term now because we're talking about the past, that have had much higher profiles in different days. But we've also talked about how hard it is to break through as a public official these days, and how hard it is to have a name recognition and a brand identity at that level that captures attention and is a known quantity beyond your little piece of the base, beyond your little town, your little community, or your stronghold. And I would say that these four candidates, that's certainly probably true, that we're talking about the party rather than the person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think about Lee Ware in Salem County, who is retiring this year, the last Democratic county commissioner. He, between he and his brother and his father, I think they have served, pretty much the last 50 something years as a freeholder / county commissioner. He's leaving. I mean,
and
Salem's
completely gone, right? Like, the idea of Democrats holding it is kind of unthinkable.
Yeah. Just since 2018, Salem was one of the state's most politically competitive counties. That's a red county now. It's small. It's the size of Old Bridge, but it is a red county, and that's not competitive. Let's talk about
institution we're talking about at all right now, and either of these two that we're talking about is Hogan, is the clerk in Gloucester.
Yeah. And so Gloucester last year, Republicans picked up 2 county commissioners. So it went from 7-0 to 5-2. They beat a long-time Democratic sheriff. Now they're looking at county clerk. They need to win 2 of the freeholder seats. This county, and we could talk about the tragic circumstances of the death of a canine, a first responder, golden retriever that investigated arson. But the reality is, even without that, I mean, this is a county. Donald Trump won it in 16, lost it narrowly in 20, but this is a county that's turning red. This is a game changer for Republicans for a number of reasons. One of them is this is Steve Sweeney's power base.
Right.
This is Steve Sweeney has been in addition to being a Senate president until last year, he's been the political boss of Gloucester County, for a very long time. So I have 2 questions, Mike, and I'll start with you. One is how's this race going to go? What do you see happening? And the second is what does it mean for Steve Sweeney if they lose control there?
Yeah. So it becomes very difficult. It would have been difficult for him to go to other parts of the state already and make the case that he's running with the solid South Jersey base, that he is, a viable statewide candidate because he's coming out of a strong South Jersey. I think it makes it harder for him to make that case that he's got, big strength. He clearly will rely on labor if he does run. He clearly will be the labor candidate. But he has a weakened hand in South Jersey, and I think it makes it harder. It's always hard for a South Jersey person to become a nominee in this day and age, right? I mean, historically, we've had examples of that, but it's such a smaller amount of the population, statewide electorate as it is. So it's an uphill battle to begin with, and now that it's so moving against him, I think it's harder. As far as what's going to happen in the Gloucester County races, it's hard to see where the Democrats have traction right now. They have incumbency, but the incumbency cuts against them because of these problems that they've had. These governing problems that they've had. So it's hard to see where they have the traction going into this race.
Yeah, and this is what Joey's talking about. I mean, the incumbents in Gloucester County. Frank DeMarco's been there a long time. I don't know what his name ID is there, and I don't know how anybody, and this, cut me off quickly on this because I can go 2 hours on this one alone, but I don't know how a county official is ever again to develop a relationship with with voters and become a known commodity on their own, independent of party leadership in the absence of local media. You don't have the Gloucester County Times anymore. The Courier Post laid off their Gloucester County reporter a couple months ago. There's no way to break out of that. And we could go up and down the state and point to all those examples, but to me, it's sort of stark in Gloucester. And it's stark in Burlington, where Gannett, literally has executed a great local newspaper there. I don't know how they get their word out anymore. So, this to me is what Joey and I have talked about. This is a generic ballot. I have to point out two things. One is that, or three things, and I'll go quickly. I'm sorry, Joe. Three things. One is that I have learned how to say Stephen Pacraduni, and he might be a commissioner. And Joey, and Micah, to your point, here's a guy who's run. He was the sacrificial lamb twice for the legislature in the 4th district in a race where they didn't think he could win. He overperformed last year against Fred Madden. Now he could very well be part of a majority on the Gloucester County Board of Commissioners. So that is a living example of what you've talked about. The other thing is Denise DiCarlo ran for county commissioner last year. She lost. The voters picked 2 other people, and what happened in Gloucester County? They said, well, regardless of what the voters wanted, we think she ought to be a county commissioner. So one of their other county commissioners resigned, and they put her in as an incumbent. And now she's running. So here she is running for re-election 1 year after she lost her only countywide race. This one is the one to watch. This is the one where we see if that old organization still has the ability to win elections. Bob Huggins, and Keith Davis and Linda Du Bois have got this super PAC. They're still being outspent, but they've worked to level that playing field just a little bit. So I think this is just the one that we're going to be watching on election night, because it's not a big county, but it's important.
As we know, probably talking to people who know this as well, but control of a county means jobs follow that, right? Jobs reward your loyalists, right? It means that you've got vendors that can be contributors. So control of these 21 counties really does carry a significant prize, not just in terms of patronage, but the ability to then have a foothold to win future elections from.
Absolutely. And it's an ability. It does. It becomes the foundation to build a political organization. You go on and on. The joint insurance fund of Gloucester, Cumberland, and Salem. Republicans are positioned to take that over, and that's huge amounts of work. Joey, we're going to move to 2 counties where Republicans can win. Tough races, not easy, and a win this year would set up a control race next year. And if they don't win this year, control is not at stake, and the stakes of those elections plummet for 2023. So, Joey, you've watched Burlington a little bit. What are you, and you know the numbers there. What does that look like?
Yeah, I assume the other one you're talking about is Somerset.
It's Somerset. You want to let's do Burlington and Somerset together.
Yeah, I wrote a whole story about them together. Yeah. They're both kind of, they're both mostly or partially in competitive congressional districts. They're both counties that Republicans used to control in their entirety, and now have lost everything, basically. Mm-hmm. And this is the year in both where Republicans are trying to get that foothold back. In Burlington, you've got a little bit more drama where you've got a new guy running for sheriff, and you've got an appointed county commissioner, Allison Eckel, who ran for the legislature previously. There's lots of individual dramas, especially in Burlington. Although, as we were saying before with Gloucester, the degree to which some of these maneuverings really reach your average voter, probably not very high. So yeah, I mean, it really all depends on what is happening at the top of the ballot. Somerset is quite a blue county in most federal races. It voted for Joe Biden by, I think, more than 20 points. But then just last year, Republicans came within less than 1,000 votes of flipping a county commissioner seat. So you've still got that down ballot strength. In Burlington, things are a little bit more inelastic. Joe Biden won the district or the county by a little bit less. Republicans came a little bit less close to flipping things in 2021. But in both cases, you definitely have a case where I think you've got to have kind of two factors here. If Republicans are doing pretty well at the top of the ballot, and if some voters in the district still have that kind of old instinct that they used to have of whatever's happening at the top of the ticket, still vote Republican for local government, then you could definitely see both get very close or even flip. So it really depends. I think Somerset is more likely to flip than Burlington, just based on the numbers, based on what we've seen previously.
And big year in Somerset because it's one commissioner, and it's also the sheriff and the county clerk. I mean, that's for the old Somerset County machine that got toppled just in the last couple of years. This is that opportunity for a comeback. I mean, Micah, I'll ask you this question. I don't mean any disrespect to the people there, but what would you guess Allison Eckel and Melanie Morano's name IDs are as commissioners in Burlington and Somerset County?
Well, I mean, it's not high. Obviously, Eckel has run, but she didn't win in her own right. So whatever her name recognition is, it wasn't enough to get her over the top the last time she ran, last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the assembly race. So it's negligible in terms of the ability to carry a race or the county, right? I think we probably could have mentioned these races in terms of potential benefits for Andy Kemp and Tom Malinowski. It's a good thing for them that the county organizations have incentive to work hard this year, because that's going to help get out the vote for the congressional candidates.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to Passaic County. This one is turning out to be really, really interesting. Republicans picked up one county commissioner seat last year. They had not won a county commissioner freeholder election since 2009, and they are. I mean, Peter Murphy, the county chairman, he's in it to win it. He's had a couple. He's had some problems with the sheriff candidate, so he rejiggered his ballot a little bit. 3 law enforcement guys running from Patterson. Were with ties to Patterson, running the former, the police Patterson Police Union president and the former police union police chief are running for county commissioner, and a Patterson police lieutenant is running for sheriff. Mike, if you look at the and if I can pull it up if you need me to, but if you look at the numbers in Passaic County on vote by mail and early voting,
right,
they are lagging way behind other Democratic counties.
I would have guessed. It's one of the counties that does the least, and unlike some counties like Essex and Hudson that are just get off to a late start, they're late adapters, and they start coming in closer to the election. Passaic is just not. The organization is not doing any adaptation. They're not doing any convincing of voters to vote this way. In fact, the reason why you have this situation last year where the seat flipped was because turnout in Passaic for Democrats was abysmal, right? I mean, it was really one of the low points for Murphy in the entire state.
So this is a point that I've been harping on a little bit, and I could be totally wrong about this, right? Like this could end up not being a factor at all. But in Passaic and Somerset, you've got an interesting dynamic where the more Republican parts of the county are in very competitive congressional districts, and the more Democratic parts of the county are in less competitive congressional districts. And so if you're seeing really close races in these two counties, you have to wonder if there's going to be a little bit of an effect from that, where the fact that Ringwood is voting in an election where they could actually decide something, or Bernardsville is in the 7th district, but then you've got Patterson is not in a competitive district, and Franklin down in Somerset is not in a competitive district. It will only matter at the edges, but the edges could be what matter in these races, right? I mean, they could be both of these counties hosted very close races in 2021. They could do so again, and that factor could be a bit of an X factor. We'll see.
Yeah. And I will just make a very short appeal. If John Kerry is watching, please don't go home so early on election night. Count votes, and I don't say this to be sarcastic. One of the problems, one of the reasons that we have a challenge in this country to people trusting the fairness and integrity of elections is because sometimes inadvertently, not meaning anything wrong, they give the impression that something's happening. Why were votes at one number, on election night, and all of a sudden, the next day it's changing. There will be people who disagree with me. Election workers are at this time of year, they are frontline workers, and they work really hard, and they are overworked, and they are dragging by election day, but the public still needs them to do that one more late night and stay and count votes. It's the Seinfeld fans watching, I think of Jerry Seinfeld at the rental car agency. You know how to take a reservation. You just don't know how to keep the reservation. You know how to hold an election, but counting the votes in that election and telling people what they are, it's really important. So, Chairman John Curry is both the county Democratic chairman and the chairman of the Board of Elections. I will send you, and this is not a partisan statement, I will send you Red Bull if you will just stay there late at night and count the votes, so that we don't go a week into it like we did last year without knowing who the winner is. I want to quickly go Bergen County, biggest county in the state. County executive, that is the whole enchilada. And Democrats are taking it seriously. Republicans have, I don't know that they found their strongest possible candidate, but again, Tedesco in Bergen County as a county executive, I think he might be a little bit out of that mold of nobody knows who your county commissioner is. Am I right on that? Do you think Tedesco runs ahead of a generic ballot there?
I would guess so. Having run a number of times statewide, there's got to be some recognition. There's got to be some name recognition. What it is, I wouldn't want to make too much of it. But yeah, I mean, he's the incumbent. He runs the county on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Something there.
Paul Giuliano and Adam Silverstein taking this race very seriously. They brought in some big guns from other parts of the state in order to do early voting and vote by mail. They seem to have it under control, but I wouldn't be shocked if Republicans snuck in with a county commissioner or two. Maybe not two, maybe one. I mean, Tom Sullivan, Mary Amoroso, they're probably stronger than the average county commissioners, but this is a county that maybe ought to be competitive, and I don't know that it is. Is there either you disagree with that?
No, I mean, you can see the scenario. The scenario would be if the congressional race pulls out a significant Republican vote, then you can see a situation in Bergen County. Then you can see where the county races in turn get more competitive. That would be the scenario. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that would be how it would happen.
So what do I do? How do I defend myself when I come back with you guys next time and you say to me, David, Frank Pallotta had coattails? what that's I don't even.
It wouldn't be his coattails; it would be generic.
It's just generic. It's just Republicans coming out and Democrats.
I mean, with a $41,000 spend, it's certainly not his coattails, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Let's talk about some local. And by the way, the other races, I mean, not competitive. Joe DiVincenzo is running again in Essex County. The only thing that I am watching in that race is whether he wins Essex Fells for the first time. I mean, this guy, again, this is one who has, a little bit of, his own independent identity, but that is going to be a blowout. Camden, Mercer. I mean, we're Middlesex, Monmouth, Ocean. We're not talking about, right, Joey? I'm not missing anything.
Well, I'm going to throw Atlantic onto the pile. Just something to watch.
I wanted to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so basically what the situation in Atlantic this year is. Democrats, for the first time in decades, won the fight. So Atlantic is one of 3 counties, along with Essex and Hudson, that has districts for some of its county commissioners. There's 4 that are elected countywide and 5 that are elected by district. Democrats won the redistricting fight over Republicans for the first time in decades. And what Republicans had done for a long time is they had combined Atlantic City and Pleasantville into one district. And that district was heavily Democratic, heavily minority majority. And Ernest Corsi, this Black commissioner, Democratic commissioner, was completely safe. Democrats finally won the fight this year, and what they did was they created one Atlantic City-based district and one Pleasantville district, successfully arguing that each of them now has enough of minority population that there's now 2 different majority-minority districts, each one anchored by a different city. And this year, the Atlantic City district is up, Ernest Corsi is up. Republicans are mad about losing the redistricting fight, and they're trying to give him a real race because his district is now less safe, since it includes Republican territory instead of Pleasantville. It's probably going to still go Democratic. It'd be weird if it didn't, but it is sort of an interesting dynamic there. And it's also, it's sort of the first step in this fight that Atlantic Democrats are trying to wage to take back control of county government. I mean, that's a prize that's kind of eluded them. They only control 2 out of the 9 commissioner seats right now, even though, in a lot of elections, Democrats win Atlantic County. So that's
Jeff Andrew at the top of the ticket there. So,
right.
So yeah, I mean, so this year is not going to be a year when Democrats have some great renaissance, certainly, but it is, the fact that it is the first year of this new map that represents a major change to the status quo. I think it's interesting. I mean, I'm a map guy, right? I like these redistricting stories, so I like that stuff. But so that's worth kind of keeping a corner of one eye on.
So, Mike, unless you have anything to add, let's move to some local races. We'll move through some of these quickly, and I want to talk about Trenton first. The Trenton mayor's race. That's a big deal because it's the capital city. Reed Gashora running for a second term. That is, I think, the most toxic, dysfunctional political environment anywhere in New Jersey, in a state that is chock full of toxic, dysfunctional environments. Trenton ranks number 1, and Gashora seems to have made a brand as the level-headed, sane, roll up your sleeves and just get the job done kind of guy. But he is. This is still a city where I think he is a minority voter there. He's a white male, and it's a runoff town. I mean, Joey, you've watched this race closely. You were watching lawn signs get unloaded today. What's your take on this? Can Gashora avoid a runoff and win this outright?
I think he definitely can. I mean, so basically, to provide some basic level context, Gashora he's a former Princeton-based politician who was a member of the state assembly. Yeah. After the legislative district boundaries changed and Princeton
whose mom was a Jamesburg school board member, so he's been
all over the place.
Yeah.
Before he was Princeton, he lived in Chambersburg, so he's sort of been forth, believe it or not. He's been Princeton, then Trenton again.
but anyway, so when the district boundaries for the legislature were changed last decade, Princeton got moved out of his district, instead of running in his new, more competitive district, he chose to move to Trenton. 8 years later, 8 years after that move, Trenton mayor's office was open and he decided to run, and he won this very narrow runoff against Paul Perez, who was a businessman, and more importantly, he was one of the first serious Hispanic candidates in Trenton, which Trenton has been majority minority for a long time, but it has seen a huge growth in Hispanic population. Now it is now plurality Hispanic instead of plurality Black, which is a pretty significant shift in terms of, you know, the demographics of the city. So this, and then throughout his first term, he warred a lot with the city council, in large part because of these two particular city councilwomen, Kathy McBride, who's the council president, and then Robin Vaughn. And both of them have said some pretty unpleasant things. I mean, Vaughn has repeatedly, directly or indirectly, attacked Gashora for being gay. McBride has used the phrase "Jew her down," and that created a whole scandal about the use of the word Jew as a pejorative, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of messy stuff. And now both of them are running against him. So with that long-winded introduction out of the way, the reason why I think that Gashora is in a strong position is that in 2018, his coalition was very much winning like huge margins among the couple of precincts in the city that were white, but that's not many of them. The biggest thing was that he also won really big margins in the majority Black precincts. And then Perez, his opponent, was mostly strong in Hispanic areas. This time around, you know, he has been representing the city as a whole for 4 years, and both of his opponents are Black. And so they probably don't, both his main opponents, there's a third opponent as well, they probably don't have the same connections in the Hispanic community the way that his previous opponent did. And so you sort of got this enviable situation that he's in, where he has his voters from 2018 who are in the Black community, and there's no Hispanic candidate to sort of lap up that section of the electorate. And so it's pretty easy to see how he would get past 50%, basically, is what I'm saying.
I think one of the keys for Gashora is not just, if, you know, avoiding a runoff, but can he get a city council he can work with that's not going to make him miserable for 4 years.
What's going to happen there is that two major antagonists have now left city council. So almost by definition, and of course we have no idea who's getting elected. We have some really good candidates like Jennifer Williams. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, right? Republican candidate. And probably just like dropped her vote count because they said she was a Republican. In the city. By definition, we're almost going to get a more reasonable council by losing these two that have really, is a lot of speculation. The reason they've been the way that they've been over the last 4 years is because they were sore that Reed won, that a white candidate won, and wanted to deny him any win that was going to help him in his reelection. Well, in the process of doing that, believe it or not, they helped create this brand of Reed as the reasonable alternative to the most dysfunctional city council in the state, if not the nation. And so they really helped create this what gives him this advantage is that anything he didn't get done over the last 4 years, people understand it was because he was shut down by the city council at every step of the way by the candidates. So it really has been set up as ideally as it possibly can be for him.
And 6 of the 7 city council seats are open. So no matter what, he's going to be working with an entirely different power structure. He or anyone who wins the mayor's race. Like that is the one true guarantee of this year's election, is that the city council will look completely different.
Right.
And you know, there are a couple candidates who are running who seem to be more in the mold of Vaughn and McBride. There are a lot more candidates running, like Teska Frisbee is another one who's running.
Right. Who comes from great lineage. She is the daughter-in-law of Janine LaRue, and has, you know, I can't think of a better teacher for somebody about local government than Janine.
So I mean, frankly, the more people you get like that who ended up winning, like probably the smoother sailing it'll be.
So, Micah, go ahead, and then I want to talk to some other towns.
Very important, which is that Reed has also lined up a fair number of endorsements from the African American community, right? Which has the potential to really help him to say to African Americans in the city, it's okay to vote for this guy, right? So Verlina Reynolds Jackson, the Assemblywoman in this district, has said that she's endorsing him. The Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman has not endorsed in the race, but she's contributed to him.
That's an endorsement.
There you go. You've got
Give somebody $1,000. That's an endorsement.
you've got Cory Booker. You've got Governor Murphy. So every endorsement, and we want to be careful never to overplay endorsements, but it says it's okay to vote for someone who may have a different skin color than you.
Yeah. So let me just talk and let's I want to move through some of them quickly, but I'll tell you some of the races that I'm watching. I mean, first of all, I could start in Perth Amboy. I mean, this is Jersey all over it. When you think that you've seen it all in New Jersey, you get a representative of a campaign arrested for walking around with $25 ShopRite gift cards and trading the gift card for their sample ballot so that this person could fill it out and put it in the mail. And it just boggles the mind. And kudos to the Middlesex County prosecutor, Yolanda Ciccone, who went after this guy, this woman, quickly and got this case done and didn't allow. What she did here is extraordinary because she stopped votes from being stolen during the theft. And that means that maybe they won't have to sit back and try and figure out how to unravel an election that people might have said was stolen. But races I'm looking at Paramus is a big deal because that is a bellwether town, and Republicans did really well there last year. They may be poised to win the mayor's race there. Palisades Park, where you had a division of Democrats in a place that has been a majority Korean American for a long time, has only had a Korean American mayor for the last 4 years. Democrats dumped him and put in the primary. So you may have this is a Democratic town, and I think Republicans are poised to potentially not just take the mayor, but maybe because of a party switch last week of a Democratic councilman, take control. I'm looking at Evesham as sort of a bellwether. That used to be a solid Republican town. Democrats have taken it over. I don't know how that's going to go this time. And Evesham being competitive, it's the trickle up theory. That if the local race is competitive and Republicans are winning there, that helps the county race. That potentially helps Healy. Some of these places there's one thing you learn when you cover politics in New Jersey is everybody thinks their race is the center of the political universe. Joey mocks me whenever and I don't see him, but I hear the eyes rolling on the phone when I start telling him about Livingston 1984, which to me was the seminal race of my generation. Everybody thinks their race is important. And a lot of these, the problem is, and again, I'll go back to it very quickly. That's a problem with the failures of local media is you don't get hyper local coverage anymore. It's up to these candidates to exist on social media and build their own. But I'll tell you some places I'm watching. Flemington, where Democratic Mayor Betsy Driver is facing Marcia Carroll, a former state senator looking to make a comeback. North Caldwell, which survived. Republicans survived the LBJ landslide and Watergate, and has not elected Democrats to local government until just a couple of years ago. That's one to watch. Milburn, where Mikey Sherrill can hit 75% of the vote in Milburn, yet the local race is competitive. They're all over. Joey, you followed a bunch of them. I'll let you add some more into it. But there's some good local races out there.
I'll add in New Providence in Union County, where it could be a blowout for Republicans, and it might not be. I genuinely don't know. The mayor there, Al Morgan, is facing his first Democrat in forever. And that's a town that has voted increasingly Democratic. So,
Harry Kluhl, a rising star in politics. So, yeah.
Yeah. You've got Monroe Township down in Gloucester County, where that's sort of the opposite. It's trending rightwards, but Democrats have had dominance for a while. The mayor's party switched from Democrat to Republican and then promptly lost a primary. So now it's sort of this odd open race. I mean, just today, we published the voters guide today. Just today, I discovered 2 other races that if I had known more about them beforehand, I would have liked to add them to the voters guide. There's interesting things sort of happening intrapartisanly in Jackson. There's a New Brunswick mayoral race. I mean, there are so many things. The nice thing is, you watcher of this live stream live in a part of the state, and in that part of the state, you probably know your own towns pretty well. And in those towns, you can look at those races and see what you see. So I hope that everyone does that. It's daunting, honestly, from our perspective, to sort of like try to get a handle on these races where oftentimes there is no proper local coverage that is doing it instead.
There's one thing that I find in common with many of the towns you both just mentioned, and that is that the activity and the enthusiasm and the candidates who are running are mostly on the Republican side. So we talk about a farm team, we talk about a bench, we talk about enthusiasm, we talk about a 2-party state, and the reality is that a lot of that enthusiasm, a lot of the candidates who are running on the Republican side right now. Most of the towns that you both mentioned, with maybe 1 or 2, Millburn being an exception, were either towns that Murphy won by a little tiny bit last year, or Jack won. And what that tells me is that there were people who were motivated by what they saw last year to decide to run to this year.
In Millburn, I mean, just Millburn is an example. The reason Republicans have been competitive in local races there, despite huge numbers at the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party. But this year, you've got a Democratic incumbent running. She was tossed from the line. She's running as an independent. She's got a running mate. So you have a split there, and the Republicans are really running it. That could be one of the shockers. And you've got nonpartisan races like Joey said, in Jackson. I mean, you have some of these races all over the state where, I wish I could cover it all. We just haven't been able to get into them. And I'll tell you, maybe we could sort of close with this, which is one thing that probably should have gotten a lot more attention. I think this may be the story that people will be talking about after the election, is school boards and a number of grassroots conservative activists seeking to take over their local school board. I mean, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but kudos to the Bergen Record. They have focused on school board races. What is it? What's the old adage? Even a broken clock is where we're right twice a day. But that's the one that everybody's going to go into and say, like, holy crap, what happened here? Look what's happened in my local town. And that's going to come from both sides of the ideology. Either these competitive races, either these are polarizing issues when you're talking about sex ed curriculum, and you're going to have unhappy people on both sides, either from the right or from the left, depending upon who wins these races. That may be like the untold, story of this campaign, and might overshadow, all of these results. That might be the real shocker.
Yeah, and for the second year now, it is getting out the vote from the bottom up, and turning out the vote. Listen, this is New Jersey. We care about school boards. We care about schools. We know our school boards in some cases better than we know our assembly members, because this is the implicit bargain. You pay high property taxes because you want good schools. So there's very little that matters to us as much as schools matter to us. And so the fact that again, and I would describe this as enthusiasm in candidates who are running and challenging the status quo, and in many cases it's coming from the Republican side, It's a turnout strategy that's coming from the Republican side. Tom Kaine tried to latch onto that over the summer with his parents' council, right? We saw Jack do some of that, Citarelli do some of that last year. It may very well be an effective strategy to crank people out who might not otherwise come out, but for their concern for their local community and their local schools.
Yeah, I mean, this is, this could be, a footnote of this is that school board elections, which until, not that long ago, were in April. Now they've been moved so that more people, get to vote, get to decide, the future of their schools. That could be pumping out Republican turnout that could make a difference in, not just races for local government or for county government, but seats in the U.S. House of Representatives could be decided by local controversies in school board elections that brings out people that don't normally vote, even in a midterm election.
Right. And the one thing that, much to my consternation, is that too many candidates are masking their policies. They're challenging the status quo, but they don't really want to talk about it. They don't want to reveal their true positions. They're kind of hard to detect where people are coming from in running for the school board stuff. Yeah. So some of these groups, statewide groups, have endorsed hundreds of candidates. These candidates don't want to talk about that. They don't want you to know about that. They don't want to talk about that because they feel that that's not going to be popular. And that's the only thing that I think is hard. It's a November election, but it's hard to really detect where some of these candidates are coming from. Talk about low profile races. They really, if they don't want to get out there and answer questions, they don't have to do that.
So our 2-hour live stream to discuss New Jersey elections coming up on Tuesday has gone 2.5 hours. I wouldn't have, given our history when the three of us talk about these races, that it doesn't surprise me.
We wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah, but all good things should probably come to an end, and we all have a lot of we have some busy days ahead. So I will make again one last pitch for the good of the republic, which is if I've been covering a lot of court cases lately on voter access. If you are a voter and you think you are entitled to vote, do not leave your polling place until you cast a vote. Get on the phone with a judge if you need to. They will talk to you over Zoom and they will give you a ruling, or at the very least say, I want to vote by a provisional ballot. Do not leave the polling place. And if you're working on a campaign, and I don't care at this point whether it's a Democratic campaign or a Republican campaign, don't let your voters leave without voting, because the chances, the three of us, we'll talk 2.5 hours about elections, but most people in New Jersey, believe it or not, or funny as it seems, if they go in and they're told you're not on our list, they just go home and that's it. And they, and that's over. And that is just so important. So these are, those are the messages. Voters, don't allow yourself to get disenfranchised. And John Curry, please count votes on election night. You guys have anything in closing you want to say? And
I'll close out with sort of a bookend to my initial thing, which is prepare for anything. I say this more as an observer than as a voter. As a voter, prepare for anything too. Prepare to make sure that your vote is cast. But sort of as an observer, this is, every election comes with a lot of questions. This one strikes me as coming with even more than usual. Just prepare for lots of possible eventualities, because this is going to be an interesting election.
Agree. It's a good point. Well, thank you both. You were two of my favorite people to talk to, two of the smartest people I know. Thank you to Kevin Sanders, who people we've been seeing on the screen, who everybody else doesn't. He has directed 3 congressional debates. He
MC.
He is doing this live stream. He is, the unsung hero of the New Jersey Globe, making all these trains run on time. So Kevin, thank you. And thank you everybody for watching and let's literally do this again soon after the election, talk about what happens. Okay. Good night, everybody.
We'll
Thank you.
talk about uncertainty then. Things will be certain.
Yes.
It'll be great.
We will. Thank you, everybody. Good night.